Thank you, Dave. Okay, welcome everybody. I'd like to call this general committee meeting to order at exactly 3 p.m. And with that, I would ask Councillor Stone if you wouldn't mind reading the land acknowledgement, please.
I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe under the terms of the Robertson-Huron Treaty number 61 of 1850 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. We commit to acknowledge, learn, educate, create opportunity, honor sacred spaces, and take actions towards real truth and reconciliation in support of our commitment to walking the path together in respect, peace, and harmony for future generations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stone. And before I move to the adoption of the agenda, I just really felt compelled to highlight, today I heard on the radio that a book by Richard Petty, who was the former CEO of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment and successful Canadian businessman, lives in Amherstburg. And I knew last year he had interviewed myself. He had also interviewed C.A.O. Corey because he was putting a book together on the 10 great small towns in Ontario. And one of those great small towns in Ontario is Huntsville. And so it's coming out officially on May 6th, and I'm assuming he will be doing a reading at Cedar Books in town. And he has his own bookstore, I think in Windsor, somewhere. But anyway, I just wanted to mention it because it's pretty exciting that we made the cut. He started off with a whole lot, I think at least 30 potential municipalities, and narrowed it down. And Councillor Renwick, one of the things in the conversation I had with him, and there was an interview this morning on the radio, as I said, about Huntsville, is its impact because of its arts and culture scene. It's like no other. And so I, in fact, think he said he's leading one of the culture, the walks this summer in our town. So yeah, anyway, I wanted to say that because I thought I was pretty excited, and I think we can all be really proud of where we live. So with that, I have a motion to move by Councillor Renwick, seconded by Deputy Mayor Armour. It is recommended that the General Committee meeting agenda dated Wednesday, April 24th, 2024 be adopted as printed and circulated. Questions, comments, all those in favor? And that carries. Okay, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, we're going to our one and only deputation, and we have Salim Hall from the YMCA to talk to us about the charity bus pull. Is that right? That's you, and welcome, Salim.
Should I sit?
You should do whatever you want, but mostly sit probably, because there is that thing about, speaking into the mic and that sort of thing. So that would be fantastic.
There we go. Does that work?
Yes.
Oh, I can see myself right in front of myself.
You can. It's on 3 screens or 4
Freaking me
screens.
out a little
Holy
bit.
cow.
So thank you, Your Worship and council members. Really, I came here to on a couple notes. I think on behalf of the YMCA of Simcoe Muskoka, specifically in Huntsville, we wanted to congratulate you. You're a year and a half into your mandate, both council and staff, and you guys have knocked it out of the park. And it should be stated on the record that organizations like the YMCA recognize this. You've moved a strategic plan forward from 2023. You've adopted a new one. You've increased your parks and recreation. You have attracted tons of new businesses. You've enhanced the economy. You've made this a great place to live, work, and play. And on behalf of our organization, not just the council, but the staff, we wanted to congratulate you over the year and a half. We can't wait to see what the next year and a half is. And so congratulations. And with that, I did take a moment to look at the new strategic plan and the 4 key areas, and it's great. It's nice and condensed. It's easy to read. It's nice pictures. And the last piece, the YMCA notice, was about enhancing partnerships to develop community and responding to community needs. And this is one of the reasons the YMCA is here in front of you today. We're doing a charity bus pull on June 8th in the parking lot of the high school there at the Summit Center. It is to raise funds for our language programs. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but we're seeing more and more people find their way to Huntsville, specifically now from North Bay, to find employment. And there are a number of people that are struggling with language and trying to adapt into a new community, to find work, to integrate into a place that they want to call home. Language services are hugely important. So the YMCA, it's no surprise to anyone, has been championing this over the last few years and providing language classes. We have a full capacity of providing language services, not just here in Huntsville, but also down in the Gravenhurst area. And it's moving the bar in how we're responding to a lot of the impacts in terms of our economic needs and staffing needs, especially when we're going into a busy summer season. So yet again, we are raising funds through our Move to Give campaign to hire staff, to run programs, to help people integrate safely and successfully into a growing community that is now in a new book coming out May 6th, which I'm going to be eager to read. But it is about throwing out the gauntlet and saying, we're doing this charity bus pull happening June 8th. Dare I say I did a similar presentation to the Lake Bays Council, and I think they're going to be putting a team together. Now, although this is happening at the Summit Center, I would be remiss to say that they and Mayor Glover may not be putting out a little challenge. I'm not saying that formally, but geez, I'm not pitting one against the other. But this is an opportunity to get out. It's a great team building. Outside of anything else, if council staff were looking for a way to build team cohesion, pulling a bus a few meters isn't the worst way to do it on a Sunday, or excuse me, on a Saturday in Muskoka. So really the reason I came out and before you is to congratulate you on a job well done over the last year and a half, but also to introduce that one of your pillars is developing those community relationships. And I see you guys out and supporting diversity and equity and mental health and food security and ride the bike ride. And so this is just another layer to what makes our community a very rich and vibrant place to live, work, and play. I'm stealing that from Director Simone. That's a great line, by the way. And so that's it for the YMCA. It's really a short and quick deputation, but if you'd like, I would like to share information. And I guess I would go through Natalie to share any electronic information about the upcoming bus pull.
Yes, I guess. Salim, yes, probably. I think, would it be through Natalie? About all of the bus pull? I was hoping you'd have a picture, but.
Oh, I got a little something, but I didn't.
Picture
Of a bus?
of a bus?
Full? I mean,
Of someone pulling it? How many people it
it's a
takes?
flyer, and again, it shouldn't go
We'll
without
get the
saying,
flyer.
I didn't want.
If you send it, that
Yeah.
would be fantastic. But I also, thank you from Jessica, thank you for that. But I also want to return the compliment, the work that you do, not just with the YM. I know how much you've been working with the district on the new immigration partnership agreement. And I know that the chair relies heavily on the input that you have been providing, and especially around, as you said, the reference to the language programs and the work that you do with our new immigrants. So thank you, right back at you.
Well, it's appreciated. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Are there any questions for Salim from the potential bus pullers? But, yes, Councillor Schumacher.
Not on the bus pull. I'm sure we'll be there and pull. But so April 4th we had a job fair. How did
did.
that go over?
Oh my
'Cause
gosh.
I'm kind of curious. I didn't
Sorry,
hear.
did my voice just get awkwardly high there?
Yes, it did.
Yeah,
it did. Absolutely.
I think it was like over 400, and it's to be noted, it's not just the YMCA, it's the YMCA in partnership with the Lake Bays Huntsville Chamber of Commerce, right? So it's a big partnership we have, and Hamada, am I saying that right now? Hamada was great to step up to the plate to help out with some necessary funding. It's a huge piece for our community. Over 420 people, I think, attended.
Wow.
Every employer said without verbatim, it was a huge success. Again, we're moving into a busy time and it's competitive out there. I mean, just look up the top of the road and how many new businesses are here and the attraction that they're having, and they're gearing up for a season. And I think more and more employers are recognizing it's year round, right? So events like this, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the Y, I'm kind of going rogue here. Maybe it shouldn't be just once a year. I mean, maybe there's a need for this. I know we host micro recruitment programs in our office. So we've helped PetSmart recruit. We've helped, am I allowed to name businesses here? Is that okay?
Well, I think they're all local
Okay,
businesses that are
cool.
new.
So we've helped a lot of local businesses, either
businesses,
staff
I
or
think
restaff.
that- right.
And so, yeah, no, it went really, really, really well.
Just follow up, then yeah, I would be on board with that, I guess, because I'm thinking, I know for myself, growing up here, we were more a seasonal entity, and that was one thing MPH and myself were sitting there chatting at maybe on the Docks pub one night and talking about the fact that when we were younger and here it was more seasonal, and it's not. Huntsville is not the seasonal town that it used to be, and it is a year-round entity for businesses. And so, yeah.
And
to
it's
your point.
residents engage, right?
Yeah.
Not, and there are other communities where your residents may not be as engaged in your downtown core or in the businesses, but the residents here take pride in Huntsville. I'm a proud Huntsvillian. Is that something, a Huntsvillian? But yeah, I'm a proud Huntsvillian.
That's great. I think we all are, and that's terrific. Yes, Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. And if I may, Salim, thank you for coming today. And I, for one, have never pulled a bus before.
No,
So if Lake of Bays can do it, then I think we can do it as well. So I'm going to put that out to all of us, that this is I think it would be a great cause. And as long as it's not too stressful for us.
We'll put you on a downhill slope.
Okay,
Make
that
sure
sounds
there's
good.
breaks,
Sounds
right?
good.
So
I think we should have a team. How many are on one team?
10's on a team. So you
So
can
this
have
would be a
two
good team if
teams.
we
This
could
this
all-
would be a great team. Fantastic
right.
team.
And if it's 10, that means CAO Corey is in as part of the team. Okay, so we have 10. All right, we'll get thanks, Celine.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It was great seeing you. Okay. Okay, we are moving along to our invited and ceremonial presentations. And the first one is with Tom Durkan from Lloyd Burns McInnes regarding the Supreme Court of Canada decision, R versus Sudbury, the history and the impact. And I think he's probably online. Okay, that's great. It's a bit slow. Oh, there he is, though. Welcome, Tom. Can you hear us?
I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can. And we can see you. So,
Great. Well, thank you for having me.
all right.
I have very fond memories of Huntsville. I'm not a Huntsvillian. That's a term I just learned from watching conference, but I have very fond memories. I very much like your town. So thank you again for having me. My name is, do you want me to just jump into this right now?
Yes, absolutely. That would be great. I was supposed to say a little bit more, but if you do it, that's even better.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we can work together. My name's Tom Durkan. I'm a lawyer here at Lloyd Burns McInnes. It's a 20 or so lawyer litigation firm in Toronto. We specialize in, general insurance matters, of course, construction, municipal liability, coverage matters. I've been practicing since 2008, and specifically I do construction and municipal work. Sports is something I like too. I do a lot of sports work, social hosting, employment issues. But for the next 15 to 20 minutes, is that a good time? 15 to 20 minutes?
The deputy clerk is nodding her head, so yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
I'm going to talk to you about RV Sudbury.
Okay.
At 23.
Tom, will you be sharing your presentation from your end? Or are you?
Yeah, I can do that. Sorry, I thought it was being shared from that end. Give me 1 minute. I actually have another seminar after this, so I have to make sure I click on the right PowerPoint presentation. Give me a minute.
Thanks. The reason why, as you all know, we're listening to Tom's presentation is we have a motion later on in our package related to this. I know you all know that.
And I'll get into that motion as well, which Sudbury is taking the lead on. Give me 1 minute and I'll pull it up.
Okay. Looks like we have some action.
So does that
There we go.
come?
Yep, we have it.
Okay, great. We're on track here. So yeah, my presentation will be 15 to 20 minutes, and the case is RV Sudbury. It's a 2023 Supreme Court of Canada decision, and it's drawn a considerable amount of criticism. It should lead to changes in how municipalities like Huntsville supervise construction projects. So the seminar outline will be like this. I'll first talk about the facts, what happened. Part 2 is how it progressed through the courts. Part 3 is what's the impact? Why does this matter? And part 4 will be what was briefly just referred to, the potential changes to legislation and basically different ways that municipalities can try and counter this. Because unfortunately, it's not great news, but the full impact remains to be seen. And again, this is dealing with occupational health and safety matters, or the Occupational Health and Safety Act. I'm just going to call that the Act over the next 15 or so minutes, just for the sake of simplicity. In terms of the facts, I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but the changes to the law is my focus here in the next 15 minutes. I will say this was a tragic and sad accident. It took someone's life. So while my role is to look at this incident through a legal lens, I wish to fully convey my respect for the victim and her family and friends who are still suffering. In December 2014, Sudbury took bids on a large construction project. The project involved underground utilities, new sidewalks, roads. A company called Interpaving Limited was awarded the contract. They were an established excavating contractor based in Sudbury and Timmins. The contract was about $1.6 million. As part of the contract, Sudbury had inspectors monitoring Interpaving's work to ensure there was occupational health and safety compliance. Sudbury was not in charge of Interpaving's workers, but they were present on site on occasion. One of the things Sudbury noticed was that there wasn't any police officers on site some days, and that was required per the contract. In fact, 2 weeks before the accident occurred, Sudbury inspectors told Interpaving about these oversights. Then on September 30th, 2015, the accident occurred. A 58-year-old woman was walking on Elgin Street. I don't know if you're familiar with downtown Sudbury. She walked through the construction site. There was a lack of safety measures taken by Interpaving. For instance, the barriers that were erected for pedestrians were deficient. There wasn't any police officers or signalers present, despite the presence of large machinery that was being operated in reverse. The pedestrian was struck by a grader and was killed. So Interpaving was charged and was fined $195,000. The Ministry of Labor's charges against Sudbury and the resulting court battle is why I'm discussing this case with you all. Sudbury was charged under the Act's regulations. 6 charges, including 3 charging Sudbury as an employer on the project. Prior to this case, Sudbury would have only been considered an owner under the Act's definition, not an employer. They were now being charged as an employer, and that presented Sudbury with greater exposure. As part of their defense, Sudbury denied being an employer. Sudbury argued they did not have control over the site. Interpaving did, and they delegated the work to them as a specialist. So this is the second part of my presentation. You can see 4 levels of court in front of you. This case traveled through all 4 levels of those court. The first level was in 2018. That's the Ontario Court of Justice. And I'll briefly discuss each level, just the key facts. Justice Lieske heard the matter at the Court of Justice. She heard the ministry's arguments in terms of how Sudbury failed as an employer. Justice Lieske looked at the definition part of the Act, and there is a definition of employer. And I won't tell you the full definition, but an abbreviated version is an employer is a person or a corporation who employs workers or contracts for their services. Sounds like Sudbury met that, but up until then, Sudbury wouldn't have been considered an employer, at least in terms of a large construction project like this. Justice Lieske saw no need to change that. So she found that Sudbury was not an employer in terms of this project, and she sided with Sudbury, essentially. She said they didn't have sufficient control. Justice Lieske also ruled that even if she deemed Sudbury to be an employer, as the ministry had argued, that Sudbury exercised proper due diligence in terms of preventing the accident. So she took her reasoning a step forward or a step far and said, even if someone thinks they are an employer, they're not liable, they shouldn't be fined because they had examples of due diligence, like their contracts, which had examples of them taking steps to prevent accidents. And they abided by that contract. They reminded Interpaving of safety hazards that they noticed prior to the accident. So just keep that in mind, due diligence, and Justice Lieske found, yeah, even if anyone thinks they're an employer, they establish their due diligence. So the ministry appealed the decision to the next level, the Superior Court. In that appeal, the ministry pointed to the contract between Sudbury and Interpaving, which established that Sudbury maintained authority for some decision-making on the construction project. For instance, in the contract, Sudbury could require Interpaving to fire employees, compel their coordination of scheduling, they could suspend operations. And as the ministry argued, Sudbury has had ultimate control over traffic, which in a sense they sort of did. But it failed at this level of the appeal. The ministry's appeal failed. And Justice Pupor was the presiding judge. He agreed with Justice Lieske. He noted a lack of prior examples where a municipality such as Sudbury had been deemed to be an employer in a project such as this. He wrote in his decision that if he found Sudbury to be an employer, it would substantially change what has been the practice in Ontario on construction projects. So perhaps Justice Pupor anticipated what was about to come. Which brings us to 2021, when the ministry appealed to the Ontario Court of Appeal. And this is where many feel a mistake was made. The Ontario Court of Appeal agreed with the Ministry of Labour and disagreed with the 2 lower court judges who found that Sudbury was not an employer. The Court of Appeal looked at the definition of employer in the Act, interpreted it broadly, and essentially found that anyone who employs workers or anyone who contracts for the services of a worker should be considered an employer, at least on a construction project like this. The Court of Appeal reminded us that the act is public welfare legislation. The main purpose is safety. And they clearly felt that declaring Sudbury as an owner and an employer was a step in the right direction. Court of Appeal was emphasizing something called the belts and braces approach. This is another way of saying that all the entities involved in a construction project, whether it be owners, employers, constructors, which is another way of saying contractors, have an overlapping obligation when it comes to health and safety. The Court of Appeal even went so far to state that these entities, owner, employer, and constructor, are required to assume each other's duties. So the main takeaway from the Court of Appeal decision is that Sudbury was deemed at that point to be an employer and would be liable for this accident under the Act, and therefore subject to very large fines unless they could establish a due diligence defense. The ministry also asked the Court of Appeal to overturn Justice Leesgay's determination that Sudbury did satisfy the due diligence requirements. You may recall minutes ago, I spoke about the first level of court and how Justice Leesgay added a line saying Sudbury did satisfy their due diligence should someone deem them to be an employer. I think she had a lot of foresight in saying that. So the Court of Appeal wouldn't touch that. They said, no, we're not going to overturn that. They said any challenge in terms of Justice Leesgay's due diligence finding should go back to the Superior Court. It should have been addressed with Justice Kapoor. But now Sudbury was happy. They didn't want to be deemed an employer, so they appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada. And this happened last year. And as some of you might recall from the news, it was an interesting time for the Supreme Court, as then Justice Brown, one of our former Supreme Court judges, had a well-publicized matter that ended with his resignation this time last year. You can Google it. He acted inappropriately after a night of drinking in the US. And that it's not just juicy gossip I'm trying to spice up my presentation with. It's important to mention, as the Supreme Court typically has 9 judges, so Justice Brown's resignation resulted in an 8-judge panel. And sure enough, the Supreme Court heard this matter with 8 judges, not 9, and they were split 4-4 in terms of whether or not Sudbury should be deemed an employer. Justice Martin of the Supreme Court of Canada provided the written decision. So she wrote the decision for those judges that were in favor of deeming Sudbury an employer. And again, she reminds us that the Act is designed to promote and maintain health and safety. So again, this belts and braces approach issue is being embraced by the Supreme Court of Canada. All eyes should be everywhere on a construction project. Justice Martin agreed that Sudbury met the definition of employer. In that respect, Sudbury employed the inspectors, they employed Interpaving and others. As there were violations on this project, Sudbury breached its obligations as an employer under the Act. So because of this 4-4 split at the Supreme Court of Canada, the Court of Appeal decision remains. And the law is presently that larger municipalities like Sudbury or even smaller ones like Huntsville can now expect to be considered an employer under the Act during a construction project. So that's the law, and towns and cities now have a greater risk in terms of being fined for their contractors' mistakes on construction projects that attract the Act. So that's one decision why, one reason why this decision is notorious. But if you read the Supreme Court decision in detail, you can see there's a strong dissent or opposition to Justice Martin and the other 3 judges who agreed with her. The dissenting opinion at the Supreme Court of Canada called Justice Martin's reasoning absurd over 20 times. And this is a near insulting tone that you typically don't see from the Supreme Court of Canada. An example of that absurdity is the unrealistic expectations that can now be placed on an employer at a construction project. So imagine Huntsville contracting with a specialist in terms of railway repairs. And let's just say there's an electrical issue or something along those lines during the project. and someone gets hurt, Huntsville could be subject to charges under the act on account of, say, their general assurance inspector not addressing these electrical issues. Now, surely these issues might not be caught or noticed by someone who works in a general quality assurance capacity as opposed to an electrical contractor, right? Like, why should a municipality be fined just because they didn't properly identify an issue, right? Like an esoteric issue. And another example of how some might consider this decision absurd, much like the Supreme Court judges did, or 4 of them, is what if you, the people in this conversation in the room, as a homeowner, are making home renovations and you hire a contractor to install something like a gas stove and there's an explosion. Now, technically speaking, the homeowner in that scenario has the potential to be charged as an employer under the act and fined. So potentially this doesn't just impact municipalities like Huntsville, and some people think it could impact everyday Canadians. So this is what Justice Pupur foreshadowed in the Superior Court appeal, the first appeal. He said he didn't think the law should be substantially changed in terms of construction projects because he felt there could be far-reaching implications. But here we are. Sudbury tried to appeal the Supreme Court of Canada's decision by arguing the 8-judge panel wasn't fair. They lost. No reason was provided by the Supreme Court of Canada. So what does that mean now? The ministry is appealing. The ministries keep going as continues to pursue Sudbury. They're appealing the decision from Justice Lieske. And again, when Justice Lieske felt that Sudbury did exercise due diligence, even if they were to be considered an employer, that sole issue is being appealed by the ministry, and I understand it's proceeding in July. So a lot of focus will be on that decision, but regardless of that appeal, Huntsville should still be prepared to establish that they took steps to ensure all worker safety on construction projects, because they're still going to be deemed an employer regardless of that appeal. So the issue really now is about, okay, how can a town like Huntsville establish due diligence in terms of accidents that occur on construction projects? The Supreme Court decision identifies this and provides a guide. And it's at paragraphs 57 to 58. It states, municipalities should delegate control of projects and make sure it's to an experienced constructor or contractor. They should also pre-screen the contractor before hiring them to determine if they have expertise, a good track record in terms of prior convictions, the capacity to ensure compliance. Municipalities should also be prepared to argue that their relative inexperience with workplace safety was why it chose to delegate control over a project to a more sophisticated constructor. I mean, that one I find kind of obvious. I think they were always doing that. Municipalities should also inform the contractor they hire of any hazards at the workplace and ensure they monitor the quality of the contractor's work. That's a big one. Municipalities should take necessary steps to ensure their contractors uphold health and safety requirements when they're caught. So if something is observed while supervising your contractor, remind them, hey, that should be taken care of. Uphold your municipal bylaws. Uphold the provisions of the contract. That's a big one. How else is this going to impact Huntsville? Well, I think we'll know more in July when the appeal in terms of Justice Lieske's due diligence ruling is heard. Personally, I think it will be upheld. I'd be surprised if they overturn that. If they do, it's going to be an even bigger red flag for municipalities. But I think either way, it would be wise to have a meeting with legal counsel and consider if, the contracts, your boilerplate contracts should be amended. Things like hold harmless and indemnity provisions should be amended to reflect the potential that Huntsville is fined as an employer as a result of a contractor's error. Keep in mind, if there are changes, that simply deflecting exposure to the contractor isn't the best move. The message we're getting here from the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court of Canada is that more responsibility should be placed on the shoulder of owners or municipalities, not less. So in other words, the belts and braces approach should be evident from looking at a contract. I'll briefly mention insurance. I'm not aware of any policy that covers occupational health and safety fines. So it's probable that the hold harmless and indemnity provisions will have to be the areas where you deal with mitigating exposure. I'm sure Huntsville has always screened contractors, but after the Sudbury decision, all municipalities should be hyper vigilant. The belts and braces approach starts in the tendering process. So ensure the contractor who's hired has experience, a good track record, credentials, enough staff to fulfill the terms of the contract. And of course, during the construction project, record keeping should be emphasized. Errors and hazards should be noted and reported to the contractor. The last thing you want after an on-site accident is to tell the Ministry of Labor that you don't have any records of oversight because the contractor was responsible for safety issues, not you, not the municipality. That's not the message we're getting. You need to paper your file. You need to be ready to produce it. So in that respect, any internal standards and processes you have should be reviewed just to ensure that further oversight on construction projects can occur. And going back to this motion Sudbury is pressing, I should add, they're really doing everything they can to protest this decision. I understand you guys are looking to help as well. So after the appeal of Justice Leeske's due diligence decision, which is in July, I've been told that from Sudbury. Sudbury's going to attempt to change the definition of employer in the Act. They have a motion drafted from what I understand. You guys might know more about that than I do, but it's not going to be heard until after the July appeal. So if Sudbury or the moving parties are successful, the definition of employer will be narrowed to exclude owners that have contracted with a constructor. If Sudbury does not succeed in that respect, then the absurdities some are worrying about could potentially come to fruition. So that's my presentation.
Thank you, Tom. Very interesting. And as you noted, we do have a motion later in the meeting in support of Sudbury's motion going forward. And it sounds like, regardless of the upcoming July decision, I think that it makes sense for our municipality to, as you said, review and do our own due diligence with respect to ongoing contracts and looking at it through the belts and braces approach that you referred to. And I think that we're certainly doing that, and we've already approached our own legal counsel to start reviewing contracts. So that's certainly my takeaway from that, and that's probably not a bad thing to be doing. But I will ask council if there are questions with regard to this. Thorough presentation. Deputy Mayor Armour.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick one. Thanks for the presentation. I'm just curious. So are you saying that we should have oversight on every contracted job that we put out going forward until this award, until it's gone to the courts and the decision's made?
Definitely every construction project that's larger, I would say, for sure. Minor projects, especially ones that likely won't lead to injury, less of a concern.
Thank you for that, Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Tom. Thank you for the presentation. And my question is, and I don't speak legalese at all, but with the Supreme Court decision, if it's a 4-4, 4 judges were for, 4 were against, how is it that it goes through if it's a draw? Can you explain
Sure.
that to me?
Yeah, of course, of course. So this appeal court is there to overturn the prior decision. And the decision prior to the Supreme Court of Canada was the Ontario Court of Appeal. And the Ontario Court of Appeal, they were in favor of deeming Sudbury to be an employer. So with that 4-4 split, it was basically the Supreme Court of Canada just saying, nothing we can do. That Court of Appeal decision remains. The Court of Appeal decision is law. We were not overturning.
Thank you. That
And
makes
again,
sense, yeah.
Again, I really do feel like if that was a bad night of drinking by one of our Supreme Court judges, I mean, if talk about a bad night, I really think he would have voted in favor of deeming Sudbury to not be an employer, given his track record. Silver lining, I wouldn't be here talking and meeting with you guys. So a lot of repercussions from that one judge's bad night.
That would be my follow-up question, that if he had been there, then it probably would have ended at the Supreme Court and we wouldn't have met you, yes, but thank you. I'm sorry
Yeah.
that we had to meet under these circumstances, but that's unfortunate for one night of drinking, yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. But Tom, you're most welcome to come back in the summer. Yeah, we'd love to have you. Are any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much again for your presentation.
Okay, thank you all. Nice meeting you all.
Nice meeting you. Okay, so we are going to move right along to our second presentation, and that's with Kevin Behan and Gabby Kalapos from the Clean Air Partnership regarding the Better Homes Huntsville Residential Retrofit Program, which we will also be dealing with later on in our agenda, and this is pretty exciting, a really exciting project going forward for us. So, Kevin, Gabby, there you are. We see you. Can you see us? Okay.
We can, yes.
Perfect. And I think we can hear you. Can you say something? Yep.
Hello, good afternoon.
We're good. We can hear you.
Hi there.
Perfect.
Good afternoon.
All right, over to you.
Wonderful. And I hope you can see my presentation. Please let me know if you cannot.
We can. It's not on full screen yet. And we've got your notes. There we go. It's on full screen now. Thanks.
There we go. Okay, thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you, council members. It's very nice to see you all again. My name is Kevin Behan. I'm Operations Director with Clean Air Partnership, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Gabriela Kalapos, who's our Executive Director. We would like to talk about Better Homes Huntsville, which is an energy efficiency retrofit program designed for Huntsville residents, also being considered by General Committee today. I'm just going to give a quick overview. Please ask me questions anytime you want. I'll give a quick overview of who we are, what the program is, how it's funded, who our partners are, the potential home improvements that homeowners can make through the program, and also the process through which homeowners must go through to participate in the program. So regarding our organization, Clean Air Partnership, we're an environmental charity. We work with municipalities across Ontario, large, small, rural, urban, to help them advance their environmental objectives. We led the proposal with your great staff, Julia and Riva at the town, to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for the creation of this program through their Community Efficiency Financing Fund. So we've been around for about 25 years in Ontario, and our vision is that Canadian communities are sustainable, healthy, and resilient. So with regard to Better Homes Huntsville, so this is an energy efficiency retrofit program. It's designed for Huntsville residents so that all season, year-round homeowners in the town can receive a loan to help them upgrade their homes to become energy efficient. This is also really protective against rising energy costs, which are a great concern for a lot of Ontarians right now. Also helps the homes be more comfortable, more modern places, increases the quality of our housing stock. So these homeowner loans are repaid on property tax bills using the local improvement charge mechanism. This is slightly different from a local improvement charge that would be often applied to a housing development, for example, where infrastructure has to be brought in. Instead, this is a local improvement charge applied just to a single property participating in the program. So the loan is therefore attached to the house and not the homeowner. So this repayment mechanism gets us around the problem of longer payback periods for energy efficiency work. About 300 homeowners are targeted to take loans through the program, through the initial 4-year term of the program. However, there will be numerous resources that will be made available to all Huntsville residents who are seeking to improve their homes, make their homes more efficient. So the program is capitalized in 2 ways. Firstly, by a loan from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for $5.3 million. That is coupled with a $2 million contribution, which the town has already approved. So because these are repayable loans, they don't contribute to debt limits. The loan will go from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to the District of Muskoka, who would then provide a debenture of the same value to the town. So what's great about this particular program that we've applied to is that it also provides operating financing. So we have been approved, the town has been approved, for a grant of $2.6 million as well. And so that grant does not have to be repaid and is used when need to be required, including websites, intake portals, communications materials, any legal advice we need. And all of these elements survive beyond the initial 4-year term of the program. So effectively, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is providing seed funding to municipalities to get these programs up and running. We're going to, through our budget, we've placed about $900,000 of the initial grant money separately to be used for incentives. And those incentives are designed for low-income homeowners who want to improve their properties, and also for those who achieve the highest energy reduction, modeled energy reductions in their projects. Just in terms of the costs, I guess what we're just trying to show on this slide is the way we scale the program up. So year 0, which will hopefully start around June of this year, is where we are just getting the program operating and developing some of the intake systems that are required for homeowners. Then in year 1, we are looking at 40 homes participating, 70 in year 2, 85 in year 3, and 105 in year 4. So the total operation cost is about $1.3 million. As I said, there's about $900,000 in incentives which are allocated. There's also $7.3 million in loans, repayable loans. And there's also about $450,000 held in a loan loss reserve, which is removed as those loans are repaid, which is brought back into the program. The average loan amount is $24,000, but this will vary based on, we'll examine each project application as they come in. The average incentive also $3,000, but it's possible that that will be higher, depending on both income thresholds and on the energy reductions that are modeled for participating homes. So partnerships are essential in the delivery of any of these energy retrofit programs. There's a lot of them being created across the province right now, and many of them are already up and running. So Better Homes Huntsville is a partnership of the town. The primary responsibility of the town is to issue the homeowner loans, to collect the repayments, to repay the district, who will then repay FCM. So we've designed this so to remove as much responsibility as possible from municipalities and to place that on program administrators. So as program administrator or project manager at Clean Air Partnership, we are responsible for all the subcontracting, the marketing, the application to FCM, as well as the reporting. Our energy concierge partner is EnviroCenter. EnviroCenter is based out of Ottawa and already operates energy concierge services for other municipalities. So effectively, when your community members want to interface with the program, there'll obviously be websites, there'll obviously be different marketing campaigns that we use, but this is EnviroCenter provides the people they actually get to talk to try to help them through the program step by step. The district has to receive the GMF loan from FCM, that's Green Municipal Fund loan from FCM, issues the debenture to Huntsville. And then we've other partners in the Association of Municipalities of Ontario who help us with municipal recruitment, and we're instrumental in getting Better Homes programs up and running across the province. Enbridge Gas provides incentives for Enbridge customers as a marketing partner for the project. And then there's our local energy advisors who actually do the energy audits, also help advise homeowners and also can drive uptake to the project. This slide is just some additional information for you to just put names to some of the different people involved in the program. But there's effectively 5 of us here at Clean Air Partnership. We'll be working on it directly and constantly. 2 at EnviroCenter, 1 at Enbridge. We haven't listed the local energy advisors because there's actually quite a few serving Huntsville. And some of the improvements that can be funded through the program. So these are all technologies that are proven technologies to reduce energy bills and save emissions. A portion of the loan for any homeowner can also be used for non-energy upgrades. So if we think of someone who wants to engage in a retrofit project in their home, wants to install a heat pump, for example, whatever it may be, they may need to install a new electrical panel, which wouldn't in its own right have an energy reduction associated with it, but we want to cover those sorts of things. We don't want the homeowners having to absorb too many additional costs. They may have to knock a wall to do this, install new drywall. So about 20% of any given loan can be used for non-energy upgrades. The LIC mechanism that we're using, the local improvement charge or PACE financing programs, as they're often called in the United States, they do require that any of these improvements are attached to the house. They cannot be removed. And again, that's just to protect the next homeowner because these loans pass with the home as opposed to being attached to the homeowner. So there will be, I would expect, a lot of heat pumps. Ideally, we will be looking at homeowners who are using expensive energy sources right now, oil, propane especially, moving them towards heat pumps, upgrading windows, doors, insulation, water heaters, solar systems, electric vehicle systems can be considered as well. And part of this is, some of it's about the direct emission reductions and energy reductions, and the other is to make the program attractive to local homeowners. And we can tweak these through different stages in the program. As we go through year 1, for example, we can look at uptake through our consistent monitoring and verification of the program. So this one's a bit of a mouthful, and I hope you've got a fairly large screen in front of you to see it. But I won't talk through it for every complete step that's happening here. But what I wanted to show for your reference was what we're trying to display is how the program is trying to take tasks away from the municipality, other than those tasks which are traditionally within the municipal bailiwick. So not creating new work for staff, I think, is key. There's certain areas in these programs that the Municipal Act has deemed the municipality must do. For example, dispersing funds to homeowners through the loans. So the town is going to be responsible for checking applicants' property tax history, and that's effectively our credit check for participation. Dispersing funds to the homeowner, updating the tax roll, receiving those repayments and repaying FCM through the district. Clean Air Partnership and our partners at Enviro Centre, we will be walking the homeowners through every stage of the program, because I'm sure many of you have engaged in renovations to your house. It can be a pain. And so what we're trying to be is that project manager that helps with the process. While an energy retrofit is not that different from an ordinary renovation, there are some elements that are a little bit unique. So we want to make sure it's as smooth as possible for the homeowner to come through from start to finish. So we will be connecting the homeowners with energy advisors, providing advice on potential upgrades, ongoing support for the homeowners as they go through their renovations. We'll be notifying the town of the key points where funds must be dispersed to the homeowners. Together with Enviro Centre, we'll be ensuring the work has been done to a satisfactory level. And we'll be managing all of the program marketing, promotion, all of the general program management. And central to the whole program are our local energy advisors, contractors, renovators. Research shows approximately 12 full-time positions are created for every $1 million spent on energy upgrades. And so with the $7.3 million project, so we're looking at upwards of around 80 jobs, hopefully, that are created through this project. And those are local jobs, those are high-paying jobs, and those are jobs that are important to the economy. Also, our energy advisors, the federal government has restructured their Greener Homes program quite recently, leaving our energy advisors a little bit in the lurch, wondering what might come of it. Should it be rebooted in the next year or the year after? And programs like this also provide our energy advisors with much needed work at a time when they need it, especially. I'll wrap there, and just to say, with Better Homes of Huntsville, you will be in good company. You'll be joining Better Homes Ottawa, Better Homes Kingston, Better Homes TO in Toronto, as well as upcoming programs, Better Homes Dufferin County and Better Homes London. And, just your worship, building on your first point of the meeting today, I think this program really has the ability to help enhance Huntsville's reputation as one of the great small towns in Ontario, if not in Canada. So Gabby and I are happy to take any questions you have for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And I hadn't realized that you two were watching the beginning of the meeting. So, yes, I believe this will actually enhance what has been written in the new book with respect to Huntsville, because not only was it the cultural, but it was because we are making great strides in the area of sustainability and our response to climate change, I think. Haven't read it yet, but I'm pretty sure that's in there. So a great presentation. I'm so excited about this, this next step for Huntsville. I know there will be questions around the table. And I just wanted to start with respect to who will be responsible for collecting the data once we have up to 300 homes on board, things around, the reduction in carbon emissions. Is that your organization or is it the municipality? And I think it's your organization, right?
It is our organization. So we will be working with energy advisors. So once these projects are completed, a energy advisor will go to the house to actually, again, put a big blower door test, they call it, on the home to see how the home is performing, how efficient the home is. So we're able to look at things like the energy reductions, how different measures are working. We're able to then also use different data sets that can be provided by staff in the town. We will want to know, how much staff hours are contributed. And then we can really look at a package. So there's a whole monitoring and verification framework that was provided to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities as part of the application, which we can also, of course, share with you, Your Worship, and with Council.
Thank you for that. I will ask Councillor Stone.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the presentation. It's very interesting. Can you tell me what kind of uptake that has happened in other municipalities by constituents there, and what would the average total spent on any given home be?
So it varies based on how long first, with regard to your first question, with regard to uptake, I think there's several different factors at play. First of all is the interest rate that the homeowner is able to receive. Some programs were able to use a 0% interest rate. Those programs went to maximum uptake immediately and fulfilled all of their program goals very, very quickly. We expect this program to use a 2% interest rate, which is still very competitive right now in an era of 6+% for these types of projects. So different programs, all the programs that have been capitalized through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities have seen rapid uptake and very high uptake. So we do expect to achieve our goal of 300 homes. We think it's quite modest. We also think in an era of high interest rates coupled with, when we look at your housing stock, there's quite a large number of homeowners on oil and propane. They are paying a lot of money right now for energy. So the business case is even more sound for them. So we think with regard to uptake, it will do well. With regard to the actual costs per renovation, so we're saying that the average homeowner loan could be about 24,000 with 3,000 in incentives. It's possible that some homeowner loans are above 30,000 with more than 5,000 or 6,000 in incentives if they were both low income and achieving high energy reductions. Depending on the current state of the building, that's a major factor here. Like, we only want to look at buildings built pre-1992 because it was that time the building code brought in higher levels of insulation as requirements. Very old homes are completely uninsulated. They would require quite a full wrap effectively inside, as well as windows and doors replacements. Those projects could cost as much as $50,000 to $60,000. So what we are trying to do with this program and through program management with all these Better Homes programs that are on the go is we're not necessarily asking homeowners to just join our program, take a loan, and perform all of these upgrades. Many of the people who are doing this work are going to be doing other home retrofit projects. And what we're doing is trying to take those projects to bring them to the next level, to make sure that that home doesn't have to be retrofitted again in 10, 15, 20 years because of rising energy costs, because of additional pressures to reduce our emissions, that we're doing it right now. So it's a mix. So some homeowners, when you're getting into the retrofit, you are going to have to spend money. There's no getting away from that. What we're trying to do is to provide the funding that adds for all of the additional energy efficiency works. And for some homeowners, hopefully that is enough that it satisfies their need to go after additional third-party finance.
Thank you for that. That's great.
Thank you for that. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor Alcock. Thanks for your presentation. We've just heard what the average potential loan could be. So I'm just wondering how the money works. So what does that look like on a tax bill? How much per year is paid back, and how long does it take for the loans to be paid off?
So there are variable terms, and this is not yet fully decided because we have to decide together with EnviroCentre and with the town what the terms of the loans are. They're not all going to be identical. There are going to be different loan amounts over different terms. The maximum would be 20 years. We ideally would not like to see any loans that are longer than the useful lifespan of the projects that were implemented. And we're dealing with effectively things like insulation that has a very long lifespan, but also other elements, heat pumps that might only be no more than your furnace, 10 to 15 years. So on the tax bill, these loans could be as little as $100 per quarter if it's quarterly tax bills. Again, it depends on how much is accessed and for what term. So we provided in our program design a range, and it is quite variable, Councillor Clark, depending on those terms.
And if I could just add one more thing on, most of these programs are designed to be as flexible for the homeowner as possible. So there's always the option for the homeowner to pay back the LIC whenever they decide that they want to pay back the LIC with no penalties for early payment. The real goal is to provide them the upfront capital costs or funding that they need to undertake the measures, and then providing them the flexibility for how they would like to pay it back. And the long-term payment plan, the 20-year payment plan, is really geared towards people who really don't want to take on an additional extra economic burden. And really what the goal on that one is to have the savings from the retrofit be the payment mechanism for the loan. So rather than paying for energy costs, you're repaying your loan from the savings of your energy savings.
Thanks for that, Gabby. Are there other questions? I should mention that to you, Gabby and Kevin, that we were joined for your presentation by the former mayor of Huntsville and our current MP. So I'm sure maybe he's here for your presentation or another one. He's nodding, yes. So I just wanted to let you know that you had additional, another person in the audience. So.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we have any other questions. So thank you for a thorough presentation. Really interesting.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you so much, Your Worship and Council.
Okay, so we are moving to our final presentation, and that's with Ashley Jones from Johnson Controls Canada to give us the background information on our upcoming town hall renovation motion that's further on in the meeting. And we're also being welcomed by Christopher Nagy, our Chief Building Inspector. So would you want me to turn it over to you, Chris, to do the introduction? Or
Sure, I'd be happy to take that on. Thank you
that's
very
great.
much,
Thank you.
Mayor Alcock. So, yeah, as you pointed out, we have Ashley from JCC LP gonna showcase their suggestion on how we can approach the asset management plan. And I know she has a PowerPoint presentation to go over, so I'll turn it over to her if that's all right.
I like the technology here. They weren't kidding. It's kind of awkward when you see your face right there. So it's kind of nice being able to have a presentation instead. So first of all, I'd like to say it's interesting that the two previous speakers that you have, because some of the stuff that we're going to talk about ties in nicely with the initiatives you guys have in terms of energy efficiency, hiring reputable contractors. So hopefully we can be able to address some of those things for the Huntsville Town Hall renovation. So just a little bit of a background, you might be sitting here wondering, what is Johnson Controls here? We're a controls company, so that's really fancy thermostats and HVAC, but I am a separate division of Johnson Controls. So we act as an ESCO, or an energy service company. So we look at existing facilities on a holistic view. So almost similar to what Gabby and Kevin were talking about in terms of your home facilities. We do the same similar things for your municipal buildings. So you'll typically see us in the public sector, lots of work with the federal government, higher ed, healthcare, and then my main focus is municipalities, and that's what I am doing here. So let's see if we can get technology to work. So my understanding is that you have different priorities for this facility. So the facilities include council chamber relocation, you have mechanical equipment upgrades, so that's your HVAC, building automation, boilers, etc. You do have energy efficiency and measures goals, as you guys are shown through different studies that you've done recently, and clearly your priorities listening to the presentation before. And then there's also the interest of accessibility improvements. The thing is when you have a whole bunch of different items, even if you were to just even take the mechanical equipment upgrades or even the council chamber relocations, it requires multiple contractors underneath, which I guess would also lead to multiple different types of risk, as we learned from the lawyers that were presenting before. And it can be burdensome going through all that. So when you have those priorities, it leads to needing things like structural engineers, architectural design, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, even hazmat assessments that you need to be able to get done. And again, that's a lot of time to review it. That's a lot of risk. So what's the solution here? So the solution that your team is looking at going with, and what I'm presenting, is a turnkey design building partner. So it's one point of accountability. You have a guaranteed price at the end of design of the construction. There's a shorter period for construction rather than having to rope in, again, all those different contractors or doing one thing at a time. Perhaps you want to do your renovation first in terms of the relocation, I should say. And then if you want to go a year or two later and go and do your mechanical, all these things take time versus doing it all together in a holistic view. And then the other thing is too, we can leverage the energy savings to offset the project costs. I was explaining to some of your team members before, a long time ago, it was really nice when construction didn't cost an arm and a leg like it does now. But the goal is typically that you leverage those energy savings to pay for the project, no different than the Clean Air Partnership was saying. Now, when you're doing a large renovation like this, and I'll being candid here, the savings itself won't pay for the whole renovation, but it's going to help offset it, because why pay for energy costs that you don't need to? Plus, we're going to be able to leverage grants and incentive support from organizations like FCM, which again, Gabby and Kevin were talking about there. So in terms of procurement, that's a big thing. I understand this is the public sector. So what on earth is Johnson Controls sitting here talking to you about? The way your team is looking to procure us is through the Canoe Procurement Group. So Canoe Procurement Group is a group purchasing organization. I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but a lot of public sectors use it. So it could be anything from reams of paper, pens, laptops, or energy service work like this. So they go out, they tender to find qualified contractors, and then they put it on there and you're able to utilize this. Canoe is relatively new, but what it is, it's a governing body that oversees organizations. What we'd be familiar with here is AMO or LAS. And so they've done it Canadian versus being just provincially. So it provides you an option to really fast track your project because you've already found a qualified vendor because it's been pre-qualified. All right, so what are the highlights which we are proposing to start off with? Because this is a design build process. So it's seeing it holistically. So right now we are at the design phase. So we have proposed to your team the cost to design, the work that needs to get done. So again, the relocation, the HVAC upgrades, the hazmat, the accessibility that we're all going to be looking at. For that design, we're looking at it is $340,000. We are looking at potentially looking at a maximum grant of $65,000. That's an actual grant, not a loan, which is nice for the study, if we put it in with an energy lens. And if the town proceeds with the construction, the nice thing when you wrap it into an ESCO project is that cost just gets wrapped right up into the actual project, again, as a design build. So what the risk is if after we do this project and we say, hey, this project, you can see below if we read ahead, 6 to 8 million, if we come back and say it's 6.2 million, this is the scope of work, this is the energy savings we see, these are the grants and loans. If you say, I don't want to do this anymore, you pay the $340K, you get that big study yourself, you walk away, and then you can go and do it yourself. You can put it on a shelf if you want with other studies, but that's where the risk is. If you move forward, again, that cost just gets wrapped up into that project. I do have different examples that I can go through. I do have the process I can go through, but I was trying to keep it short and sweet rather than word exploding to you guys.
That was short and sweet. Thank you, Ashley. That was great. And I know this is in preparation for the note that's, again, coming later in the meeting. Are there questions for Ashley while we have her? Yes, Councillor Renwick.
Just one for clarification, but thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ashley, for coming. The $340,000 for the project cost, is that the $65,000 grant, is that taken off that amount, or is that, if we were to get the grant, is that something that comes off the $340,000?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so it's $275 then.
Yeah. And I think I have a question, but I can hold off and ask Chris, I think, pretty sure. All right, are there any other questions? Okay, Ashley, seeing none? Wow.
Thank you.
Wow, I know,
Thank
I know. That's because we're going to fire away when Chris comes forward later. But it's probably not the right word to use, but you know. Thanks for the... Okay, thanks very much. All right. We are now moving to divisional reports, and we are going to start with Operations and Protective Services. And the only item we have under that is I'm going to ask Councillor Fitzgerald to provide an update of the Ontario Good Roads Association conference, as 3 of you just attended and are freshly back.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'm happy to report that the conference was a great success. Again, it's existed since 1894. It's in its 130th year, so it's a long-standing tradition where road professionals get together and exchange ideas and talk about new technologies. And we were fortunate to have Premier Ford there, and he spoke to a large group, and Mayor Starlos, the leader of the opposition, was there, and Prabmeet Zakara, Minister of Transportation, was there, and a lot of good information exchanged in those panel discussions and fireside chats. And I will give everyone the links for the information that our takeaways were, and there's a lot of personal stuff too in networking. But there was some fantastic keynote speakers talking about new connectivities and new ideas for accessible communities. We had a great speaker on mitigate, adapt, or suffer, connecting global change to local impacts and solutions at the municipal level. So it was a new way for us to look at global warming and change. And she said, you know, we have, and she was very scientific, but a very entertaining speaker as well, but she said, we have climate weirdness now. And the whole room, I think, changed the way they think about what's happening. So look what's happening in all the events. Everything has changed so dramatically. It's weird. Think of it as weird, and how can we change it? So I'll give everyone the link to her stuff, and great information, but lots of good things came from it. And we had a bunch of different options that we go to as you normally do at conferences. And we chose one that sticks with me the most is the minimum maintenance standards for our roads. And they're currently rewriting legislation there to try and make it safer, easier for us to meet the guidelines, and fantastic things come in there. And it's a really collaborative effort with our roads supervisors. So I'm hoping that there's news coming down the pipe with that. And there was some discussion about the weather events as well in that, and how it's given everyone the appropriate tools to be safe and keep our community safe. So there were so many things that you couldn't do because there's just not enough time. But I think one positive takeaway that most people don't consider is there was a few of us from the community in different aspects of whether it's council or operations, and there was some good team building experiences there. You don't have an opportunity in this environment to do those kind of things. So I think it's important that we continue to do it, because you learn the nuances of people's jobs more so than you can around this table or doing what we do. So if anyone has any questions, be happy to answer them. I will send links out to the speakers that I was impressed with, and they usually have the program available after it's over. So questions?
Not a question, just a comment. Thank you. It was a great summary, and I would love to see a couple of the links. Thanks.
We are tired though. It's a long haul. You're going all day long.
I think Councillor Fitzgerald, Deputy Mayor Armour would like to say something. Did you?
Yeah, not just more of a comment. There was a gentleman there, Jeff Speck, who talked about walkable communities. And it's how, I wish I'd have seen his presentation 3 years ago before we did our Main Street, because it's like they've just turned the clock back and traffic, they're not so much worried about cars and traffic anymore, they're more worried about pedestrians and bike lanes and stuff like that. So his presentation is really interesting. So if you get a chance to watch it, you should.
Okay, thank you for that. And now I believe we are turning it over to Councillor Schumacher to do the community services agenda. Right?
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Alcock. Yes, so we are on to community services 7.2.1, and we have Jacqueline Surratt and Jillian Jordan. Welcome back, Jillian. And they are here to do report number CS 2024-7, the Muskoka Heritage Place Capital Plan 2024 update. And I will read the motion and then you guys can discuss your great report that I have here. So it is moved by Councillor Fitzgerald and seconded by Councillor Cloutier. It is recommended that council approve an overall increase in project costs of $18,180 related to the 2024 MHP capital projects, and further that the budget variance be funded from the Muskoka Heritage Place Hartley Bequest Reserve. And Jacqueline and Jillian are here to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the status of a number of capital projects at Muskoka Heritage Place and seek guidance from Council on how we can cover the overall budget variance of $18,180. The 2024 capital budget includes 7 capital projects for Muskoka Heritage Place, which many of them were carried over from the prior year, and you'll see that noted, bolded in the report. It is expected that overall, the projects to be funded through the reserves will be higher than originally budgeted. Given that this would further deplete the reserve, in accordance with the budget and financial controls policy, staff are seeking approval from Council to fund the variance. Staff are recommending that the budget variance be funded from the Muskoka Heritage Place Hartley Bequest Reserve. This reserve was set up in 2023 to credit the bequest made to Muskoka Heritage Place by the late Catherine Ann Hartley in the amount of $162,963 for projects related to the museum's mission and mandate. The Muskoka Heritage Place Hartley Reserve ensures that the project can continue to move forward without further delay and at no additional cost to the taxpayer. Should Council wish to direct staff to stay within the budget this year, option 2 would ensure projects supported in part by the Rural Economic Development Program are completed within the funding guidelines and preliminary work on the sawmill can be completed so that it is a better condition to move forward once funding is approved.
Thank you, Jillian. Are there any questions for Jacqueline or Jillian? Very good report. Well done. So I will call the question. All in favor? And that carries. That was easy. I get to, where's, welcome back. I get to hit a that was easy button. Where are you? Don't push your luck. Don't push your luck. Yeah, I was going to say. And that was also easy for me because now I get to move it on to divisional reports for corporate services, and Councillor Morrison will take over the chair.
Thank you, Councillor Schumacher, and I wish mine were as quick as that, but they won't be. We have a bit more excitement. We are moving on to 7.3.1 with Deputy Treasurer Diller coming to report on this one, and I do have a motion. Moved by Dan Armour, seconded by Nancy Alcock. It is recommended that the Fire Communications Radio Project, budgeted 2023 in the amount of $62,150, be approved to be spent in 2024 at a revised amount of $89,150 and be funded through the IT Capital Reserve. And with that, I'll pass it over to Deputy Treasurer Diller. There you go.
Good afternoon. Staff have worked to bring forward a capital project update to update committee on the status of many of the capital projects that are budgeted for 2024. We've included in the report a high-level status update on the procurement process, estimated time for completion, and any expected changes to the budgeted amounts. It can be expected that some of these estimates will change as projects get underway and are finalized. This report is generally intended for information only to provide a status update, but there is one motion included seeking approval for the fire communications radio project for $89,150 to be funded from the IT Capital Reserve. The fire communications radio project has been included as a separate motion within this report as it was not completed in 2023 as originally planned due to the availability of equipment. Originally in 2023, the project was budgeted at $62,150, and due to additional expected costs, the project is expected to cost $89,150. I'm available for questions if there are any.
Thank you, Deputy Treasurer Diller. And if you guys have had a chance to read through the report, the one thing that really stuck out to me is the amount of projects that are coming in under the original budget. And I'd like to point out staff, because some of those projects that are coming under budget are because of staff on the fly realizing that the scope could be changed and that less could be done to satisfy the need. And it just shows once again that our staff is always trying to save our town money. So I want to acknowledge that and thank Suzanne for the great work on the report. Any questions for Deputy Treasurer Diller on that at all? Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Chair Morrison. So just a quick question. When is this project anticipated to be started?
The fire control communications radio project. I believe it's underway at the moment, but yes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. Anybody else with any comments or questions? Seeing that, I will call the question. All in favor? And all opposed? Okay. All right, we are moving forward to 7.3.2 with Director Frame. Report number Corp 2024-5, Strategic Asset Management Policy Repeal and Replace. And I do have a motion moved by Nancy Alcock, seconded by Monty Cloutier. It is recommended that committee approve the Strategic Asset Management Policy as attached to Report Corp 2024-5, and further that budgets and financials 18 Strategic Asset Management Policy be repealed and Resolution GC 152-18 be rescinded. With that, I'll pass it over to Director Frame.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Morrison. So I'll be short and sweet on this one. So Ontario Regulation 588-17, the asset management regulation, requires that the town has a strategic asset management policy in place. So originally, the deadline for this policy was July of 2019, and the town did create that policy prior to the deadline. The regulation requires that the policy be reviewed and updated as necessary every 5 years, which is why it's being brought forward today. The new proposed policy includes all of the necessary components from the regulation. The existing policy was largely just rearranged and reworded for conciseness and clarity. And I'm available for questions.
Great. Thank you, Director Frame. Any comments or questions from council? Maybe we will be as easy as Councillor Schumacher's line. This is not normal when we talk numbers. With that, I will call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that carries. Okay, and sticking with Director Frame, we're going to go to 7.3.3, report number Corp 2024-20, Better Homes Huntsville, number 3. This might sound a bit familiar. There's a bit of a long motion, so bear with me. I'm going to have to give you the mover and seconder. Moved by Dion Schumacher, seconded by Corey Clark. Whereas Resolution GC 108-22 directed staff to report back to General Committee with final program details. And whereas staff are awaiting receipt of the draft funding agreement from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, now therefore it is recommended that committee approve the Better Homes Huntsville program details as outlined in Appendix A of Report Corp 2024-20, and further that the bylaw authorizing a local improvement charge for the Better Homes Huntsville residential retrofit program as outlined in Appendix B of Report Corp 2024-20 be forwarded to Council for consideration, and further that upon receipt of the agreement from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, staff be directed to draft a bylaw authorizing the execution of the Green Municipal Fund Community Efficiency Financing Loan and Grant Agreement and forward to Council for consideration. That'll pass over to Director Frame.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Morrison. So back in 2022, Council directed staff to apply for funding for the Better Homes Residential Energy Retrofit Program through the FCM Greener Homes Community Efficiency Financing Program. So staff were directed upon the successful application to report back with the program details and draft a local improvement charge bylaw. So basically, council approved the application for the program through FCM, but hasn't actually approved the program itself yet. So we did hear earlier this afternoon from Kevin and Gabby from Clean Air Partnership on the program details. And the draft LIC bylaw is attached to the staff report. So we are currently awaiting the funding agreement from FCM, but I did want to mention that the funding is made up of two parts, which Kevin had identified in his presentation. So the first is a grant portion, which will largely be used for the program development and administration, and then partly for rebates on the retrofit performance by homeowners. The second is a loan portion, and that's going to be used to pay for the retrofit costs and then repaid through that LIC, through the LIC payments. And that's going to be on their annual property tax payments. So the hiccup with this loan portion is that Huntsville is a lower tier municipality, so can't actually authorize the debenture. We are the first lower tier municipality to go through this FCM Community Efficiency Fund program. So we are working with FCM on exactly how that's going to work because they also have not gone through this process yet. The district will need to be requested to authorize the debenture for the town. And we have been in discussion with the district and, you know, we don't foresee any issue with that. And a draft bylaw would come forward to council for council consideration once the final payment of the loan amount is made from FCM. So that's kind of down the line. Once the payments have been received, then a debenture bylaw would come back authorizing that bylaw or that loan. So I am available for questions.
Thank you, Director Frame. I'm not surprised that our team is bringing us something that we are first at again, because that seems to be a theme. I'm going to go to Councillor Renwick and then Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Morrison, and through you to Director Frame. The question I have is about the loan through the district. So, and I want to echo what Chair Morrison just said about, again, Huntsville is one of the first lower tier municipalities to do this. The loan that's done through the District of Muskoka, are those interest payments set for a portion of time, like 20 years, 10 years? And I think maybe Kevin talked about that, but I wasn't really clear. How is that set? And is it a standard time, or is it, is there no interest? There must be interest, though. Yeah, got to be interest.
So through you, Chair Morrison. So yes, the loan portion of the SCM funding that the district will authorize the debenture for, essentially they are willing to provide that loan for 2%. And we, as part of the sort of the discussion about the funding agreement that we're currently in with FCM, we are talking about the term. So that will be a set term. And generally what they've suggested is that term be sort of 5 years longer than, or within 5 years of the repayments of the LIC, so that we're kind of on par with our LIC repayments. As we receive those repayments through property taxes, we will pay off the loan. Right? So it's kind of we get the money from the property owners when they repay their LIC, and then we pay down our loan at 2%. So we can use that 2% interest rate to provide through the LIC bylaw as well, so that, you know, we're not making money on that 2%. It's really just a flow through.
Thank you, Director Frame. Over to Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Morrison. And thank you, Reva, for the report. It was great. It's sort of interesting around the district. When I read that in the report, I thought, oh, okay, I get it. And then the presentation today. Do you think that will have an effect on how nimble our program will be, or do you think doesn't affect it at all?
So through you, Chair Morrison, I honestly don't think it's going to affect it at all. It's really just a formality that needs to get set up.
Okay.
And we are working with FCM and the district on how exactly that's going to work.
Right.
But I think it's just more of a formality because we're a lower tier municipality.
Right. Okay. And then I'm sure it was in the report, but on the timing, when do we think we'll have our ducks lined up on this?
So through you, Chair Morrison, the plan is to do all of the setup and the administration and everything, get the program set up so that we can launch it in 2025. So it'll be up and running for 2025.
For 2025, right? Okay. Thanks.
I think I should point out, Mayor Alcock, you did not ask for a follow-up there, but you know.
I didn't, I know, I jumped right in.
See
and
Scotty here and you
that's
just
because
jump
I'm
all
a
over
little
it?
bit nervous. I'm nervous because
It
of
happens.
his nib sitting in the audience.
Surprised there's not more media here with him.
So, my apologies, Chair Morrison.
Just joking around. I'm going to go to Councillor Clark and then not Councillor Stone.
Thanks, Chair. So thanks for the report, Reva. So just had a question. If a purchaser's buying a home with one of these loans on them and if the seller is unable to or unwilling to pay the loan off at the time of closing, is the purchaser able to pay the loan off as part of the purchasing process before they were to take ownership?
Yeah, so through you, Chair Morrison. So the way that the LIC bylaw works is essentially it's set up as, you know, the amount of property tax owing is based on the repayment for that year. So, and it's tied to the specific property. So it's not like the entire thing needs to be paid back when a house sells, right? So that LIC bylaw is attached to the property, not the property owner. So if they're in arrears for that year, that the amount actually owing on the property tax roll, then that would need to be repaid through the seller. But you know, future years through that repayment of the LIC bylaw, that it doesn't need to be repaid in full if a property were to sell.
Thanks for that. I guess my question is more to do with the fact is you might have a purchaser that doesn't want to take the loan on. They have the funds and they want to just pay the loan off. I guess that's my question.
Director McKenzie?
I'm not a lawyer, but I would assume that through the transfer process, that probably could be done through the lawyer. Jessica's nodding.
And I think I'll quickly speak to that. I remember two things. One, during the report, it was mentioned that it's a fully open loan. So it could be repaid at any time without penalty. So that could be done right after closing, or there could be an adjustment made by the lawyers. If there are arrears, just like if a seller has prepaid for propane or if they're behind on a bill, it can be adjusted at closing. So great question, but I seem to remember them saying it's fully open and with no penalty. So. Any other questions from Director Frame? Deputy Mayor Armour?
Thanks, Chair Morrison. Just a quick question about the criteria to apply for this loan. Does it have to be on municipal services or can it be on their own?
So through you, Chair Morrison. So I would have to check with Kevin on whether, like with retrofits related to water. But largely, like the heating and everything isn't on necessarily on municipal services, propane, oil, that kind of thing. So I would have to check on him if there's like a specific area where you need to be in, whether it's rural or urban, that kind of thing. I can double check and get back to you on that.
Good question. I would assume when he mentions that the majority of the people that use it are on oil or propane, it's probably allowed to go rural, but it's something for us to know for sure. Yep. Anybody else have any questions on that? Two quick questions. I think it was either Gabby or Kevin mentioned that some municipalities do it at 0%. Is that because they choose to subsidize the program, do you know, and cover the interest for their constituents? Something we can find out maybe?
I can find out.
Okay. And secondly, I know that we're trying really hard not to do any in-year staff hiring. So wondering if this adds any extra burden to Lee and his team in the tax department or to you guys as far as administration?
Not to me.
The way that we originally had approached this program is that that it would be a turnkey, that the municipal staff would not have to do the work of this program. So that is the intention right now. So as long as that remains true, there will be work for the taxation department because they will have to add, just as any local improvement charge, we would just have to add that to the bill. But we should be able to handle it within our existing resources as long as the program is set up the way that we intended.
Sounds great. Just forewarning you, Councillor Clark's reaction if we ask for more staff for this program down the road, how it's going to be. Councillor Cloutier.
Through you, Chair. Through that, the presentation, the flow chart, I didn't see where any permits, who gets the building permits or electrical permits. Are we going to waive the cost on them? Or are they included in the charge that the person has to pay?
Good question. Over to Director Frame.
So through you, Chair Morrison. So through you, Chair Morrison. So I think the intention is that like the homeowners would work with Clean Air Partnership. So Clean Air Partnership is not applying for permits. It's still the homeowners kind of doing the renovation, and they would, if there needs to be a permit for what they're doing, then they would still need to go through that process. And I don't think that those permits would be covered through, like, we wouldn't waive them. That's not the intention. I'm not sure whether they would be covered through the LIC and be captured by all of that. I would have to check with Kevin on that.
Sounds good. Thank you, Councillor Cloutier. Any other questions or comments? See, Councillor Schumacher.
So essentially he said this is basically for homes mostly built before 1992. Is that going to be a prerequisite or a hard and fast, or are we kind of looking at those criteria?
So through you, Chair Morrison, to my knowledge, the application for FCM included that the homes that was one of the criteria, that they were built 1992 or earlier, because those are, like Kevin said in his presentation, in 1992, that's when the building code changed and they required more insulation. And those homes after 1992 are still not probably super efficient, but more efficient than the ones that were built pre-1992. So that's our focus right now. And as the program progresses, maybe after the four-year plan, four-year sort of program, then maybe that's something that we could look at in the future.
Excellent. Seeing no other hands, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Okay. And that carries. Okay, that was longer than the others, so we're getting behind now. Moving on to, it's not your fault. We're going to go now to Director Frame for her last report. 7.3.4, report number Corp 2024-27, amendments of sponsorship and dedication policy, Appendix E, naming of town assets. And I will read the motion moved by Nancy Alcock, seconded by Bob Stone. It is recommended that committee approve the amendment to Appendix E, naming of town assets under the sponsorship and dedication policy as attached to report Corp 2024-27. And further, that resolution GC 168-23 be amended to remove the second and third paragraphs related to the commemorative naming working group. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Morrison. So back in September of 2023, Council approved a brand new naming of town assets program under the sponsorship and dedication policy. Since then, we have received 2 applications, and those will be brought forward separately in staff reports once the public consultation and public engagement has been completed on those. So those do not fall under this proposed policy amendment. So while working through the process, some amendments have been identified in order to ensure the process is as clear and efficient as possible, both for staff and the community. So some of the proposed changes that I wanted to highlight. Largely, there's a change in the composition of the commemorative naming working group. So these changes include updating the group from being a staff council group to a staff-only group. And this is largely for efficiency purposes, and was felt that council is responsible for establishing the criteria in the policy, while staff are responsible for actually implementing the policy. So that's why we felt it prudent to include sort of administrative staff on this working group only. The second piece of the working group change is updating the makeup of the departmental representation on that group. So that will include a member of the marketing team. So in the original policy as it exists right now, we identify specific staff members on the working group. So staff felt that this be more of a flex group where there would be representation from marketing. There would be a member of the community services team, the department manager that is in charge or care and control of that specific asset to be named, and myself, so that there is a constant member on that team. By not naming specific staff, with myself as the exception, we will be able to avoid any potential conflicts of interest because we are a small town. And we'll be able to empower some of our non-management staff members to participate in the process, which is, I think, it was part of our strategic plan. One of our values is empowerment and allowing those staff the opportunity to participate in something like this. Another amendment in the, another proposed amendment, sorry, in the report is the addition of application deadlines. So this will significantly increase the application or increase efficiencies in the application review process throughout the public consultation process. And it'll provide the ability to ensure that any financial impacts to any approved naming can be added to next year's budget. So we're not asking for additional funds in year. Another thing related to timeline, so we've actually added a posthumous timeline of 5 years. So this is to remove any recency bias or grief naming. So when the town approves a commemorative naming, it is intended to carry significance for many years. So as a result, names of individuals really must be evaluated very carefully to ensure that they remain positive and meaningful as time passes. So that's why the 5-year timeline was added. If an individual's impact on the town remained positive and is still meaningful after that time, it's likely to continue for many years. So I have done some research on these timelines, and most notably, naming policies for most provinces in Canada include a 5-year timeline. And I do want to mention that there is a clause in the proposed policy to ensure that commemorative naming after a living person or sooner than 5 years after death can be considered in extraordinary circumstances. So that is still an option. This is just sort of to ensure that, you know, the recency bias isn't there and that the meaningfulness of that name is kind of continues on and is lasting. So I am available for questions.
Thank you, Director Prim, for all your work on that report. I'm going to go to Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Chair Morrison, and through you to Riva. I think that very last point that you made about the 5 years, and I understand that it is across different provinces they do that. I think I would recommend like a 3-year. And I just feel like sometimes if there is someone that passes away that has had a great impact to our community, that emotion, I understand the emotion can sometimes be, you know, kind of guide people's decisions. But I think if we leave it to 5 years, it kind of gives the message, well, we don't really care. And I know we do, but I just think the optics of it. So I would recommend possibly a discussion, I don't know how the rest of council feels, that perhaps we look at 3 years rather than 5 years. Just a suggestion there.
To that, would you like to propose an amendment to the motion?
I would.
Then we could open up
Yes.
the discussion.
Sure.
I'll let Jessica know that. And while Jessica's working on the amendment, I will reach out to Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Chair Morrison, and I would second that amendment, Councillor Renwick. But I do support the reworking of the working group, and I think the idea of removing the elected official from the group makes a whole lot of sense. I think it's likely a lot of pressure on that elected official, especially the one we had on there, you know. But no, I think that's a good change. And to the reference, as to 5 years to 3 years as a possible another one. I hadn't thought about it, but in the back of my mind, I think I had the same concerns. I look at a couple of the more recent ones, and I think Ross Kerwin was one, and it wasn't 5 years for sure. And I think we really felt around this table we wanted to show support for that individual, and there was no question. So I'm not sure. I think 5 years is a bit long. So I would support 3 years.
And to comment on that, I think Riva's clause that she had added with the extraordinary circumstances does cover it, but I am also in agreement that 3 years is better. But I appreciate Director Frey bringing in that idea. Even 3 years is better than the way we had it. So it's a great change. Councillor Fitzgerald and Councillor Cloutier.
Thanks, Chair Morrison. Thanks, Riva. I know I had a brief tenure on that committee. And I love the proposal of, and I like the motion to change it to 3 years. It seems more appropriate on timing wise. And I agree that it shouldn't be a political decision. It should be a community decision made by staff based on criteria.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. Councillor Cloutier.
I'm gonna have to disagree here. I like the 5-year because if somebody's has the honor enough to get their name on something or whatever, they've obviously made a big enough impact in the community to go from 3 to 5. I think within 3 years, there is some, you'll get some people coming forward with the emotional attachment, and if we turn them down, then we're the ones that are going to be looking really bad. But if it goes 5 years and the emotion is still there, but not as heavy as it was, and if the person or the group has made that big of impact on our community, the same thoughts will be there in 5 years as 3. And also, if they've made a big impact in the community, we can still go, they can still apply at the 3-year and try. But I think if we just cut it off at the 3, this way here, they can apply at 3. And if it doesn't happen, they can apply again at 5. But I think if any group or person has made that big of impact on this community, it will, 5 years is quite sufficient for it, in my mind. I mean, there's other things that, you know, there is different circumstances and we have to be open to everything. But I think with the 3-year, that being able to apply at 3 and then locked in at 5, I just think it should be put as written as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Okay, with that in mind, if Jessica is ready, is Jessica ready? Probably good to put the amendment up on the screen so that we can finish off the discussion and vote on that and then go to the main motion. Okay, so of course I'll just read the parts in red. Still moved by Helena Redwick and seconded by Nancy Alcock. And we're adding the words with the following changes. 1, reducing consideration of the following from 5 to 3 years. A, commemorative naming in honor of elected or appointed public officials, town administrative officials or staff. And B, commemoration of an individual. So I think a lot of us have spoken to this part already. For those who haven't, are there any other comments on the 5 or 3 year difference? Okay, so I'm going to call the Deputy Mayor Armour. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Morrison. You know, I think I have to agree with Councillor Cloutier on this because I think it's the exception's already there. Because if it is 2 years, and like the Ross Curran, for example, that was brought to us by the Rotary Club, and it was, you know, census around the whole table. That's an excellent naming opportunity to name that Ross Curran. So I think that 5 years seems to be maybe stretching out there. I think 3 years is too close, but there always is that exception. So I think I like the 5-year, really.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Armour. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair Morrison. I just want to question whether or not there's the ability for people to apply a second time. Is that within the bylaw?
Yeah, so through you, Chair Morrison. So if they apply prior to, say we leave it at 5 years and they apply prior to the 5 years, the commemorative naming working group will still review the application, and you know, we can come up with some sort of, you know, administrative process, whether they need to reapply, or, you know, we can assess whether it meets the criteria. And if they do meet the criteria, they just don't meet the 5 years, and it's not sort of an exceptional circumstance, then we can absolutely advise them, you know what, you do meet the criteria. However, you know, we suggest that you either reapply, or, you know, if there's some sort of administrative mechanism where we reach out to them in 2 years and say, hey, we can consider this now. Are you still interested? Right? So there are some options there. Yeah.
Thank you, Director Frame. I will throw in one more quick comment on that. Let's be honest, part of the rationale for the extra time is some people do have some skeletons in their closet, you know? So that is something that we discussed at the agenda review, and it does give more time. I'm in favor of the 3, and the reason being, we have a lot of amazing people in our community, and there are people like Ross Kerman is a perfect example of where, I mean, he could have been honored the day after his passing. He was so instrumental. The problem is, I think if somebody brings something forward of somebody they've lost, and it's a year in or 2 years in, and they know that 3 or 4 others have met the extraordinary circumstances criteria, and they're told, well, your person doesn't, and they got to wait 5 years. I think that optics of that saying, as opposed to just wait till the 3-year mark and we'll review, might be a little better received from the public. And what I don't want is staff to have more drama on their hands when they're approving applications. It's already going to be a touchy subject. So I think 3 years takes away some of the drama for you guys, as opposed to making people wait 5 when they see people wait 1. So just my thoughts on it. But are there any other comments on this amendment? I will call the question on the proposed amendment. It's the Renwick. Changing it, unless you'd be voting to change it to 3 from 5. So all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that passes. All opposed? Okay. Very good. So that does pass with the amendment. I need to call the main motion as amended. All in favor? And opposed? Okay, so that carries, and thank you, Director Frame, for all your work. Okay.
Thank you. I must go. I was looking, I was.
All right, moving over to the Director of Legislative Services to present. 7.3.5, Director Kalea will report on report number Corp 2024-28, Public Notice Policy Repeal and Replace. The motion is moved by Jason Fitzgerald, seconded by Corey Clark. It is recommended that committee approve the draft public notice policy attached as Schedule A to report Corp 2024-28, and further that staff prepare and present a bylaw to repeal bylaw 2011-18, provision of notice policy to council for council's consideration. Director Kalea.
Thank you, Chair Morrison. So this is one of the 8 policies that's required under the Municipal Act. This policy deals with notice under the Municipal Act. However, I have added a few sections because additional sections and information, because I know you'd probably be wondering where the planning information is, but that is separate. That is not, they have their own legislation, bylaws and everything for their stuff. Now, the government hasn't went ahead and changed the legislation to match the loss of our newspaper, which is our print newspaper. So hopefully that will be coming in the future, but in the meantime, we've had to change this policy to include a digital format. We've also clarified some information in the policy, and we've added some information in the policy, so I can give you an example. One section in the current policy, which is 211, which is pretty old, so it needs updating, said put on the website. Doesn't say how long, it doesn't say anything like that. So we've added additional information and tried to clarify a bit more. There will be some instances, but few and far between, that we will have to advertise in a print newspaper. Now we'll have to advertise in the Toronto Star. It will be expensive. I can tell you another municipality had to advertise for their development charges bylaw, and it was $2,700. So now, thankfully, one of the things the province has on the floor right now, a bill to change the Development Charges Act and the Planning Act to deal with their notice, but that doesn't help us with the Municipal Act notice, which is what this policy deals with.
All right, any questions for Director Kalea on this motion? It's an easy one. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that carries. And I get to pass this over to Deputy Mayor Armour as chair.
Thanks, Chair Morrison. Before we carry on, we're actually going to take a 30-minute break. So we're going to come back on at 5:30. So right on time, 5:30. See you then. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for giving us that little break for refreshments before we moved on. We're going to move on to Development Services, 7.4.1. And we have Chris Nagy here, and it's report number DEV 2024-29, Town Hall renovations, JCI Building Management Proposal. And I do have a motion. It's moved by Mayor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Morrison. Whereas Resolution GC 1/2023 directs staff to obtain the services of a consultant to create a building management utilizing the concept drawings of option 1 for Town Hall. Now, therefore, it is recommended that should committee wish to proceed the Town Hall renovation project, committee direct the CAO, Director of Community Services, to enter into a project development agreement with Johnson Control Canada Limited Partnership for the Town Hall building and to include the deliverables as outlined in report DEV 2024-29. And further that the cost of the project agreement up to $340,000 be taken from the facilities capital reserve. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As directed by council, staff were to come back with a building asset management plan for the Town Hall building. Through this plan, staff were asked to incorporate the architectural concept plans with council moving or being relocated to the staffing area of the 3rd floor, the structural requirements of the professional engineer report, and the sustainability elements to be incorporated. Knowing that this project workload would lead to requiring more technical documents and a lead consultant, staff felt it appropriate to engage the assistance of JCI to bring forward a proposal for the management plan. As detailed within the invitation, the invited presentation by JCI, their final package will include all of the construction documents, including architectural, mechanical, structural, as well as the coordination of the drawings. A final lock-in price to complete the project will also be associated with that package. As this project is outside of the 2024 budget, we are suggesting that the cost be funded through the capital reserves, which we have confirmed that this, and we have also confirmed that this project would qualify for the $65,000 grant through FCM. As per the presentation, this is also a locked-in amount from JCI, so there would be no additional amounts associated with this. And as we are recommending to engage Johnson Control to enter into the project development agreement to create this building management plan at this time. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much for that. Chris, do we have any questions about this report? Councillor Schumacher.
Facilities capital reserve, 1.6 million unaudited. So does that not take out what we've already agreed to for change rooms?
Director McKenzie.
Sorry, I believe that does include what we were taking out for the change rooms. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Any more questions, Real Taylor? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Not really a question, but a comment. There's no way I'm going to support this motion or the spend of $340,000. And I'm not going to support further conversations about renovating Town Hall. In this economic climate, it's not the right time to be doing the project. And it's not the right time to be taking on a large amount of debt that we'd have to service to complete a large scale renovation like proposed here. So I'm saying that for me, status quo is the right choice here. With continuing the building maintenance that needs to be done and continuing repairs that need done as per the asset management plan. And I have no problem with fixing and repairing what we have. I believe that we are responsible for that, but I certainly wouldn't support this project.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stone.
Thank you. I tend to agree with Councillor Clark. If we were agreed to go forward with this $6 to $8 million spend, then this makes perfect sense. I'm not necessarily inclined to do all of the things that we've been talking about. I would love them all to be done. I would love the new council chambers and all of the upgrades, but it's not feasible in my opinion. So I'm afraid I can't go forward with this. But I will ask a question. So with this $340,000, and that would come back with all the design work, would each individual piece of the project be costed out?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Stone, for that question. We, through discussions with JCI, we did ask if we could go with a phased approach in this aspect. I know the presentation did look at a collaborative, doing everything, having that one source and everything. However, that was the direction to have that phased. Things within the previous reports do kind of hinge on one being completed in order to do another. So if I take the structural components, right, as an example, we wouldn't, knowing that, there's a lack of insulation, so there's a lack of heat retention, we wouldn't simply put the insulation up there knowing that there may be some structural issues in doing that, right? So to kind of piece it out, strictly going, the structural component would be this, and the insulation would be this, and the mechanical would be this. We wouldn't be able to kind of piecemeal, we'll only do this or we'll only do this. The phased approach was looking at kind of let's look at the sustainability aspect and the third floor as kind of the first phase, and then maybe look at the other floors for future councils, right? So, yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mayor Alcock, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Armour. I completely understand. I tend to agree on this is not the time, at least in my opinion, to be looking at a possible $6 to $8 million project. That it's just not where I'm at the moment. Having said that, when we refer to status quo and the projects that I think that are essential at the moment that you've often raised, Chris, which is roof replacement, the HVAC system, and all of those. To me, if you're going forward with that kind of capital project, it's nuts not to look at energy efficiency as part of that capital upgrade. And so the numbers that are in here in our briefing note that's sort of replacing like for like and not considering upgrading as far as energy efficiency. And if that's the case, if we decided not to go forward with this contract, could we apply for funding through FCM if it's an energy efficiency upgrade?
Good question.
So there may need to be several people to answer that, if I may. I think, Jason Fisher's here to kind of talk about replacement and everything like that. I would suspect that Director Mackenzie has some information on the actual grants, if I can put her on the spot.
I don't have it specifically on this project because I don't know what the whole scope would be, but we would certainly look at applying for the FCM grants if we were moving forward with any of those projects. I know there is some benefit if you have actually 3 buildings that you're looking at for energy efficiency. They have a kind of a different tier for that. But yeah, we would definitely be looking for any of our buildings if we're doing any energy projects. We'd be looking at that FCM grant because they're specific to municipalities for updating their facilities.
Thanks for that. Does that answer your question? Okay. Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Armour. And I think I would have to concur with what's been said so far, that I could not support this at this time. But having said that, and after what the mayor just said, of the budgeted items that are on this list right now, I don't expect that the front stairs are that important, but I'm thinking that the HVAC replacement and probably the roof replacement are essential. So would you say, like, and where's the kitchen replacement? Like, but so I guess my question is, what are those of those items? Which would you say are the most important, and which ones could we do for 2025 for the capital forecast, if you had to?
Through you, Councillor Renwick. So HVAC, obviously, they're at their end of their life expectancy. There is a few units on the roof. It's not everything, and there is some furnace as well, furnace issue. So.
If I may, so those are the most important, you're saying. So the HVAC, the roof itself is that's on that list, is it not? Roof replacement and structure.
That's correct. So the roof, we're actually having a thermal scan done next month, and there might be a couple wet spots, but the roof is in good condition. But again, the assessment will speak to that.
Thanks for that. Do you have any other questions around the table? Your worship. Councillor Cloutier.
Thank
I'll
you for
stick up
saving me.
I mean, this is a project that has to get done at some point in time, but with our increase in what we've had to put on the taxpayer this year, and so we spend that money, that drags on for year and year. I think for now, we just have to bite the bullet, do our repairs. And I know staff might not be happy with what the conditions they work in, but we're going to have to make do, and we can do the best we can with what we have. That's basically what we have to do right now, in my mind. There's other projects also that are in the community that have to be done too, our garage and stuff like this that in the future has to be looked at. But I think just right now we can't go ahead, but I definitely support going ahead and doing the repairs that are desperately needed and get them done as soon as we can.
Councillor.
I remembered.
All right, perfect.
So at one point, we looked at bringing our council chambers up to AODA compliance because of the legislation which is coming into effect of 2025. I think I know the answer to this, and that is we are compliant as long as we keep it the same. And so we can carry on as status quo. It's not less than ideal, but we can carry on. I keep looking over at you, Dion. So I think...
Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, okay.
I
Thank
said
you.
it's more, and Chris can speak to this, it's more the fire code issue for this particular chamber than for us not being able to have a meeting in here than it is AODA. We are AODA compliant based on the time that this was built. And if we renovate, then yes, we have to go to a
Then we
different
would
standard.
have to. Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Councillor Schumacher.
I have a question too. So I'm not on board. I think we've got, as Councillor Cloutier and others have alluded to, we've got a lot of other projects and moving parts that we have to consider than necessarily the renovations. I'm on board with what has to get done, so HVAC replacement, those things that you guys are saying. I guess my question though, we go to the 1.6 million unaudited for facilities capital reserve, and I think I've brought this up before, and I think maybe Councillor Morrison as well. We're not funding this facilities capital reserve probably to the extent that we need to be based on the amount of facilities that we have, correct? Because if we're looking at all the projects we're going to need to do, when we talk budget this year, what is the proposal that we should be essentially looking at to fund that reserve to look at the projects that we want to do?
Director McKenzie? David?
Thank you for that, and you're absolutely right. As we've noted before, we're looking at overall, we're about 30% of what we should be funding, not just for facilities, but for everything. We are bringing back our revised asset management plan with a lot of updated costing in it, so we will be bringing that forward prior to July 1st. So we'll be looking at that time so that we can have some budget proposals for the 2025-26 budget.
Thanks for that. Do you have any more questions around here? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as read? All those opposed? And that does not carry. Thanks for. So we're going to move right along here. We're going to have our bylaw enforcement officer, Corey Crewsome, come down. We have report number DEV 2024-36, electrical vehicle charging stations enforcement. And I do have a motion moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Touche. It's recommended that the committee approve the draft parking control bylaw attached as Schedule A to report DEV 2024-36, and further that staff present the bylaw to council for consideration. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Armour. So I have brought this report and draft bylaw forward in anticipation of Lakeland Energy and the putting in 6 EV charging stations in the High Street parking lot. Obviously, they haven't been erected or put in yet, but as an anticipation, wanted to bring this forward. Within the draft bylaw, there's 2 definitions, one for an EV vehicle as well as one for the EV charging stations. Within there is 2 offenses, one for the parking of a non-EV vehicle in an EV space, as well as an offense of parking a EV vehicle in a charging spot that is not plugged in. And this, with it being in the High Street, they would be subject to the 3-hour parking limit that's already in that parking lot. With that, if anybody has any questions, I'm here to answer it.
Thanks very much for that. Do we have any questions? Councillor Cloutier.
Thank you, Corey. I see here for the removing and impounding vehicles, so they'll get towed out of electric spot. They'll be removed if they're parked in there.
Through Chair, we will issue a $125 ticket first.
Yeah.
It's not very common that we would tow a vehicle out. We do issue tickets first and foremost, and it is $125. So hopefully that deters anybody from parking there further.
And for parking in a fire lane what's that fine, 3?
So depending on where that location is, Dara Holloway is $75 as the first set amount, and then the set fine's $100. So it's $75 for the first 7 days and $100 after that. If you go to, say, Walmart or Independent, that's a $100 fine.
So I just want to know why we're charging $125 for an EV spot that nobody's going to die from.
Yeah.
But when a fire truck can't get down the road, we're only charging them $75. That's just a question that I have, and it's a problem on Dara Holloway. Not to bring it back up again, but when you're tit for tat here, that's all.
Yep.
That's all I'm saying.
Thanks for that. Any more questions around? I'll call. Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Is that something that we discuss now or no? Because the bylaw is before us at this point, and no? Okay, thank you.
No more questions. No more questions around that. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, and that carries. Thanks, everybody. Now we're going to move on to 7.4.3. Director Maxwell, report number DEV 2024-37, housing needs assessment. And we have a motion with that one too. So it's moved by Councillor Schumacher, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It's recommended that staff be directed to develop a request for proposal for a consultant to complete the housing needs assessment and policy recommendations to support the development of appropriate housing. And further that, a maximum budget to not exceed $40,000 be funded through the municipal accommodation tax reserve. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Armour. As noted in the report, through the consultation on the strategic plan, there was a lot of discussion about housing, and we have been doing a significant amount of policy changes over the last 3 or 4 years, trying to make it easier for people to build more housing and lower the fees and looking at our affordable housing strategy. And nothing is having a significant impact at this point. So a housing needs assessment would be a study that could identify where we have the most need, specifically on our piece of the continuum, not necessarily all the social housing side of things. That is, of course, the district responsibility, but it would give us more on-the-ground data that would help us identify where the biggest needs are in actual, not anecdotal data, but actual data. And then we can craft policies and develop a housing action plan moving forward that will help us not just for this year and next year, but moving down the line, so that all of our policy decisions in the future would be based on actual data that we can monitor moving forward. So that's really the basis of the report. One thing I would mention as well is that a lot of the grants that are coming through the province and the federal government all require you to have a housing needs assessment before you can apply. So if we didn't have one, we might be missing out on funding as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that. That's interesting. You got to have this completed to apply for the grants. Do we have any questions? Mayor Alcock.
More importantly, not really a question, more of a comment. I support this, partially because of the last comment around the grant funding, that it is generally a requirement. But I also support the idea of having this kind of data when we're dealing with our development community, that we can support the ask of the housing type that they're bringing forward. And we can direct it either this way or that way because it actually meets a particular need in our community. So I think that's really helpful. And you know, someone else, I think it was Councillor Morrison, said earlier in the day, any data is useful. And if it makes us more informed, I think it's very useful. And it certainly isn't the kind of work that we can do in-house. So I support this, absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Stone.
I disagree with what the mayor has just said. I can't support another consultant to tell us what we already know. There is, you mentioned most need. We all know we need rental housing. That'll help with the workforce issue. And I don't believe a consultant's going to come back with some silver bullet that says, you can do this and get that much housing. Well, we already know it's rental housing that's needed. We can address that. And on another issue, I don't think the MAT tax funds is appropriate for this spend. So I won't be voting in favor of this.
Thanks, Councillor Stone. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I won't be voting in support of this either. I'm reluctant to support the $40,000 study. And like Councillor Stone, I'm a little bit surprised that this study would in fact qualify under the MAT funding at all. I'm not sure how that was decided that it would in fact qualify. I completely understand what was said about the grants and the timelines and stuff involved there, but as is always the case for me, if you want me to support a spend, then I need to see it included in the budget. This wasn't, so I won't support it.
Councillor Clark, can someone, maybe Director McKenzie, can you explain why this would fall under MAT tax?
So we do have the municipal accommodation tax budget principles policy, and affordable housing was one of the principles that, or items that would be supported through the MAD.
Thanks for that. Kristen? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Armour. I was just going to add as well that the strategic plan hadn't been adopted when the budget was being discussed, so we didn't include any funds at that time. And this is one of the objectives in the strategic plan that we're working on. So.
Thanks for that. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Chair Armour, and through you. Great comments, and it's just sound weird for me supporting a consultant spend because I think everyone knows I don't like spending money on consultants unless absolutely necessary. This is a situation, we've had many, many meetings. We're almost 2 years into our term, and truly, as a council, we haven't done much. Staff has done a lot of trying to advance this, but they haven't had a lot of direction from us around this table. And partly, we don't have the raw data. Councillor Stone is right. We know what's needed, but are they bachelor units? Are they one bedrooms? Are they studios? Are they rural fourplexes? Are they rural eightplexes? What's being done in other communities that we could use? So for me, I come up with a lot of ideas and some of them are not great. And I think having this data will help me form my ideas. I would just hope that we would not take this as the gospel every time. If we get this data and we don't agree on some of it, I'd want us to be flexible. But the reason I support it coming from the MAT tax is, first of all, like Councillor Clark, I don't want anything being spent in year that's going to affect the levy. So that's why I would support it coming out of MAT. And I also know when we talk about the MAT spend, we're looking at a percentage going to housing, a percentage going to healthcare, and a percentage going to miscellaneous, a percentage going to ECDEV. And I know that the hotel members of HMATA are very much okay with us spending money on housing, because the more staff they get, the less they can find housing for them. And not to mention the fact that if we want grants, we know how hard it is right now to get money from the federal and provincial government for housing, the federal mainly. If we don't have our ducks in a row to even ask for the money, we can't expect to get it. So I wholeheartedly support this, against my will of not paying consultants. Our staff does not have the capacity to do it themselves, and I really hope we approve this tonight.
Thanks for that, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Chair Armour. Yeah, I'm not crazy about spending money on consultants either, but if this is a requirement of funding down the road, whether it be from the district, the province, the feds, we need to have it in play so we can keep that funding coming. We do have some builders that are doing work here, and they're doing it because of the grants and the funding. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. So if that funding is not going to be provided without this, then we need this. So I would say we have to support it to continue with what's happening with our building.
Okay, Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Chair Armour. Yeah, I'm in support of this. As we've heard, staff really can't get this done at this time, so the consultant is what's needed. I guess I'm kind of querying, like, yeah, we're doing this now because grants are available when, Kirsten, and how soon can we do this so we can apply for what we need?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Armour. The grants that the federal government has been talking about, and the Housing Accelerator Fund that they raised last summer, those are the types of grants that everybody is saying are going to keep happening and keep going through. So as soon as we can get this done, we would, and then we'd be in a better position to move forward.
Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think I do agree that this is money well spent, and I think it's money through the MAT tax that's well spent. My question is, how long would it take to have a consultant do the work that needs to be done? Because that's going to affect when we can apply for grants as well. I don't want it to take a long time, but if you have an idea when it might be finished or completed.
Thank you. At this point, no. I don't have a timeline. We would, once we release the RFP with what we want to see as a timeline, and then we get the consultants submitting, then we'll be able to have a better idea. So.
Councillor Morrison.
Just a last question. For me, the up to 40,000, obviously we don't know what the cost will be. Have you heard of other studies? Do you anticipate it being a certain number, 20 to 30? Or?
Thank you. Yes. I do know of one study that just came through that they budgeted 35. So that's why I thought 40 would be, just in case we can't get it for 35. So.
Thanks. So I have a question. Just, what type of grants would we be applying for?
Good question. I think that if there were any housing projects that the town was being involved in, or any updates for infrastructure that we could get in on as well, if they were specifically stormwater management and not necessarily water and sewer, those sorts of things, then we would be in a better position to make sure that we were able to move forward.
In addition, is this assessment or this plan comes out, is it going to assist developers in building affordable housing?
I hope that what we get out of this town, what I intend to get out of this plan, would be policy frameworks that would be more clear and give us more direction as to what we could ask for when we have developers coming forward too, and that percentages in a subdivision of what should be multi-res and what should be single family and things like that. With the district growth strategy being halfway done, I also think that that will assist and maybe alleviate some of the information that they'd be looking for. We'll be able to pull from the growth strategy. So.
Okay, thanks for that. Your worship.
Thank you. In response to your question, Deputy Mayor Armour, where I think this would also be very helpful is at the district. The next phase as part of their housing strategy is to start the advocacy work with both the federal government and the province, bringing forward specific proposals for all of Muskoka. And many of those proposals will be project specific, and it gives a lot of credibility when you go forward to other levels of government if you can support that ask with the appropriate data to support that project. And I know in the case of the number that they're looking at, there potentially could be 2 in Huntsville. So this kind of information is really helpful and supports the ask going forward. So I think it's really useful information. My concern is timing, actually. Yeah. To your comment, Councillor Renwick, that, I mean, if we don't get this and we start our advocacy work, which I know the district chair is really chomping at the bit to start, then, you know, timing's not great, but who knows?
It definitely sounds like it could set us up for success.
I think so. I think so, yeah. And correct, my apologies, but I follow up. I believe the town of Gravenhurst is currently undertaking a similar project.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Well, that's interesting. Too bad we couldn't piggyback with them. Yeah. Are there any other questions around the table? Not seeing any, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? And that carries. And now we have report 7.4.4, DEV 2024-38 Developers Roundtable Overview. And this is for information only, and Director Maxwell.
Thank you. This report is really just an update on the discussions that we've been having with some of our local developers and district staff and town staff, obviously, about some of the hurdles they're running into, where they're having issues, where we can help them. And it's a great forum. There's a lot of open discussion, and I think it's been very helpful with all of us dealing with different challenges that we're all running into. Some of the issues that have been raised are discussions about peer reviews and why developers aren't building affordable housing, which I think is a pretty big question. We've talked about pre-servicing agreements, and then of course securities and this new CPP and challenges with it. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. And I also have Brandon with me and Director Bissonnette too, in case there's more ops related questions.
Thank you for that. Do you have any questions around the table? Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Armour. I meant to ask you this morning. I understand time is money, and that prevents people from getting stuff out of the ground, and then it can put more costs onto the end user. I understand all that. But there are stuff that we as a town need. And I'm wondering, when it comes to traffic studies, we talked about Highway 60 and Chaffey Township Road having a more comprehensive study done. Would it be unbelievably cost prohibitive for us to think of doing an overall traffic study for the town of Huntsville that dictates at what point would it be a decision to not build any more homes if we got to a certain traffic count or home count, and then passing on that cost per development to the developers building in each area? I'm just wondering, because I'm just thinking of time, but also we can't just sacrifice all of our needs to just make things quicker. So Something along those lines, if we had an overall study of what areas could handle carloads and everything else, maybe that's something to consider, or maybe that's crazy, I don't know.
Not crazy. I'll let Brandon speak to it as well, or Director Bissonnette. As part of a secondary plan exercise, we would do something like that as well to determine what the roads need to be constructed like in order to accommodate the growth that we're anticipating. So that would be a town-directed study when we're talking about that North Huntsville secondary planning area. But for existing infill type development, I think it's a bit more complicated.
So in addition to your question, we can look at doing an overall. I will consult with the ministry to see how they conducted their highways within Huntsville. Maybe we can use some of those parameters and see how that might apply. One thing I do want to point out though is in our development standards, anything that produces more than 60 trips per day requires a traffic impact study. Anything less requires, it can be a traffic impact brief where it's just a letter that if it's just one entrance, we're just asking that they review that entrance for traffic and it's designed appropriately. So some of it isn't just necessarily the amount of traffic, it's just safe in and out, stuff like that. So the full traffic impact studies can be, if we do one in one area, but we say this one goes, and this one goes, but then all of a sudden you get another application in, it throws it all out of whack. So I would be cautious of doing a full study, but I can definitely look into that and report back or see how that would look. We can definitely look into that.
So that's great. So it makes sense. It's not just the amount of cars. You're talking about where the driveways, where the entrances. So that makes sense and why it might not be a great idea, which is why I asked these questions. But like think, for example, the recent application on Chiefy Township Road, they had a traffic study at 12 units. And I think for us to actually speak to the public, we needed another traffic study there and we asked for it and we got it. But if there was an overall traffic study for that area, it might have already been determined that lot could handle 24 units. And you say in lieu of a traffic study, you give us $500 or a certain number and you can handle your 2,400 units or 24 units, not 2,400. And then, the building's out of the ground quicker. So maybe just something for discussion. And if you think it's something we can do to speed up processes without sacrificing our needs.
Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind is like when we do these traffic studies, there is recommendations and there's horizon years in them. So 5 years, 10 years, 15 years out, they make those recommendations and there might be impacts to properties or roads. So with that, there's upgrades that have to be done as part of that application. So I guess when you have a whole perspective of what has to happen, how that gets done, I can see the developers going, saying, well, I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. That study kind of ties that developer to his obligation under his development. So, but again, happy to look at that, yeah.
Thanks for that, Brandon. Your worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Armour. I just to follow up on that point, we I think have had discussions that are similar to that, that in areas where, let's say if you look at Center Street and Haynes, where we know one development's going in and did a traffic study, and then a year later, another one right on kitty corner to the last one and is also asked for a traffic study. And we know the whole area in the next 5 years is developing out. That I'm sort of with you, Councillor Morrison, if I'm understanding the direction, that is there a way that you could do one comprehensive, in fact, I thought we talked about it, one comprehensive traffic study that takes into consideration full build out for a particular area. And I thought we had started looking at that, Brandon, or maybe I'm dreaming in Technicolor. And that's possible too, and that's okay,
Through your worship, I would never say that. I only recall just going through with the developers roundtable meeting as far as, zoning in on certain areas for traffic studies. But I think it's a great point. We can look at some major intersections within Huntsville that are under our jurisdiction. Anything, the traffic studies, they look at certain areas within a radius. And so if we can identify some major concerns, we can go and do those studies on them. So as the areas get developed within there, we know that this has to happen at certain times. That might also help the developers as they come in, but we would need to identify some of those areas where growth is about to happen.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So that's terrific. And what comes to mind, and it ties in with the secondary plan process, because the next area that I think we will start seeing a significant amount of development will be the Earls Road, Golf Course Road area. And we know that there are at least 3 developers who are thinking of doing things. So that might be a really good pilot to combine it with the secondary plan. I don't know, I'm throwing all sorts of stuff out, but it seems to me that would be a good thing to think about. And I do have another, but it's okay, it's completely unrelated, so I can come back.
All right. Now, Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to change gears a little bit and talk about peer reviews and the comments about that. I don't receive a lot of calls from developers in regards to peer reviews, but I do get a lot of phone calls from citizens in regards to peer reviews. And I continue to get a lot of calls. People find them cumbersome, confusing, and a lot of times when I get the phone call, they're at their wit's end. I know that this system has been designed to help our staff, but just from somebody who gets a lot of calls, I can tell you that I'm not so sure at times how much it helps individual citizens that are trying to get through the system to get a permit or to get something built. Just a comment.
Thanks for that. Your Worship.
Again, if I may, to follow up on Councillor Clark's comment, I wonder, the district we've just approved last week at CAPS, an amendment to their peer review process. And they're developing a set of criteria and guidelines that they share with the proponent upfront. And I can't remember the whole process now, but it does actually sound like it does streamline the whole process much more than it currently does. Takes out some of the uncertainty, which is usually what you hear people are really annoyed with. I thought we had dealt with that, and now you want me to do this, or you're asking me to get someone else to do the review. So I think the thought is it will remove that. And I'm wondering, have we talked to the district, and are we thinking of doing the same?
Thank you. We did talk to the district last year about, specifically for environmental impact assessments, what the criteria are and how we can help streamline what we need people to provide us with. It's very challenging dealing with a lot of people because nobody wants to give us any information up front. And that's where it's always a lot of back and forth and trying to encourage them to identify how important it is to give us the information so that we can make sure the development is going to be okay. And I know from an engineering perspective, we've put in place or tried to put in place as well that when somebody's doing a pre-consultation and asking, what do I need? We scope what they need specifically for that development, and we try and highlight, we only need a biologist to evaluate these 3 things or look at our development standards and see what you need to address. So it is challenging, and everybody is always really busy. So all of our local consultants are always very busy too, but we are trying to work through a process so that it's much faster, yeah, and more efficient. So.
Excellent. Councillor Renwick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I believe my question has been answered around the table, but I guess my question back to you, Director Maxwell, is do you find that these roundtable overviews are helpful in the long run? Like, do they take up a lot of time, but are they useful? And maybe that's putting you on the spot, but I'm just thinking with, the previous item that we just discussed about, consultation and having a consultant, we must be getting a lot of really good feedback from developers, perhaps, or like you're saying, maybe they don't. So my question to you, without putting you on the spot, but yes.
No, initially, I have to say, the staff were quite apprehensive about the idea because we were expecting that it wouldn't be a very helpful forum, and that there would just be a lot of accusation and, you know, not because of who's attending or anything like that, just that that's a forum where, yeah, that we are saying, what are we doing wrong? What do you want us to do instead, right? But I have found it to be very helpful. As the last year or so, it's been much more, I don't want to say it's not time consuming. It's not that. It's just that the discussions have been really helpful. And the things that are being raised are things that we can actually look at, implementing, changing, reviewing, and there's a lot more back and forth that's, it's very open. So when they're saying, why are you doing it this way? We're saying, this is why we're doing it this way. And there's that understanding from both parties, which I think has been great.
Yeah, being a member of that committee, I can tell you how interesting it is for myself to understand the hurdles that they have to go through from not only them, but also from our planning department coming back. So I find it very helpful. Your Worship.
And if you don't mind, I thank you, Deputy Mayor Armour. So one of the items that's listed in the report is it involves securities. And we have our next roundtable tomorrow morning. And there are at least 2 developers who are often asking us about our 100% securities. And one of them in particular, it drives him crazy, and he would like us to reduce the amount of securities for projects that he's involved in. And as the report says, the district has, in fact, reduced their percentage by, I forget the numbers, by 20% or something like that, or 40% of, and so very, and rightly so. The director has pointed out that it's not a direct comparison between the district and what the town is obligated to do. But I would hate to not have any conversation around this table, and I think it's really important for our director to hear what the conversation might be, because we will be asked, and it sort of, do we as a council support the current policy, which is we ask for 100% securities to cover things like the internal roads, the sidewalks, the drainage, stormwater management, all of those things. And we hold them, obviously, in case they're not done or they're not done correctly. And one of the questions I think I had was, how often do we need to use them? And we have 2 people here that would be able to answer that. And that is an important factor, I think, from our perspective. But I think it's important that we deal with this to say, yes, we support this current policy, or we would consider reducing it. And if we would, by how much? And for me, it's important that I hear it from council, because we'll be asked tomorrow morning for sure.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Chair Armour, and comments Mayor Alcock made me think that, you know, what are the numbers? How often do we end up in that situation where we're assuming negligent work or non-completed work, and is 100 too much? So for me, it's data. We need the numbers, and if we have the numbers, then we can do it. The cost of money now is the driving factor on this, and that's why they're requesting it. And I think if I'm looking at the roundtable contributors and participants, I don't see a lot of risk there. So do we invest in our roundtable builders? And if the data can prove that we should, then we should, and we should do it sooner than later.
Thanks for that. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. And just a few comments in regards to Mayor Alcock's comments. That I guess the concern I have is regarding securities, is it's kind of the last recourse that we have as a municipality when a developer doesn't do what they should do. And I can't speak to the total number of cases, but I have, in my short time here, had a case where, in fact, we had to deal with a situation like that, and it was the last recourse. Those securities were the only recourse that we were able to make the situation or resolve the situation. So I'm not so sure. I'm certainly not convinced that reducing those is maybe the right answer.
Thanks for that. Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, and just a quick question, because I'm always curious about this. Peer reviews protect us, liability and everything else. But I'm wondering how, in your experience, how often as a percentage has a peer review changed the result of the study? Has there ever been a time where a peer review says, no, this study isn't accurate?
I will perhaps just comment that when we're getting a peer review done, it's not always because we're questioning what's in the report. It's also that we don't necessarily have the expertise to evaluate it. So hydrogeological studies, we don't have a staff person that has that. Technical biologists, we don't have any ecologists on staff. So those are just to confirm that the work that's been done has been done according to all the provincial guidelines and procedures that we don't have the ability to do. I know that we go through quite a lot of back and forth with people when we ask for a study and they think we're peer reviewing it. No, we're just actually reviewing it as well. And that a lot of time with the stormwater management studies that are done, depending on how large they are, and it would take staff, a month to review or something, we source those out, but it's actually just reviewing the study, not peer reviewing. So there's sort of two sides to it, but there have been quite a few cases where things have not been done necessarily according to all of the requirements for certain evaluations. And so they do go back and forth a bit and they update them and they fix whatever those issues are. So.
Thanks for that. Oh, just for information, good conversation. I'm going to turn it over to the new business, and Mayor Alcott resumes the chair.
All right, thank you for that bit. It'd be interesting to see Mr. House tomorrow. There we go. Okay, I am under new business. We are starting with 8.1, which is a motion with respect to traffic congestion at Huntsville High School. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Morrison, seconded by Deputy Mayor Armour. It is recommended that staff be directed to work with Trillium Lakelands District School Board and the District of Muskoka to address alleviating traffic congestion during pickup and drop-off times on Park Drive at the north and south intersections of Brunel Road and report back with the findings. Councillor Morrison, would you like to? Is there
Thank you, Mayor Alcock, and thanks for bringing this to the table. Essentially, this is a very selfish motion. As a guy that does drop-offs at the high school, I've taken many pictures where I'm backed up to the front of the Summit Center, trying to get out on Brunel Road at 3:15, to the point where you can't even get down in between Alberto's and the Summit Center, get down that road to get around to the Active Living Center. So it's actually preventing people from getting through there. And I think there might be an easy solution. I think at the top of on Brunel Road, at the top of Park, sign saying no left turn, because that's what's holding it up. If everyone's just going right, it just keeps moving. It's when somebody's at the front trying to turn left that it backs all the way up to the Summit Center. And if there was no left turns from 3 to 4 and 8 till 9, I think it would work. And it's the same thing at the other side of Brunel going out the other way, and buses do go out both ways. So the backlog is wild some days. And I think truly, if you were trying to go left, you could go right, go up Florence Street, come around and get back on in 30 seconds, and it wouldn't prevent the people from going so far back. So I think if staff can look into it, and I know CAO Corey's already had some discussions with people involved, and just figuring out if it's something we can do to alleviate it, because it would make a big difference for a lot of people.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any questions with respect to that? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Okay, moving to the next item. I have a very long motion, and this is with respect to the presentation we had earlier. I actually don't think I will be reading the whole thing because we'll be here all night. So if you can put it on the screen, that would be great. Thank you, Jessica. So what I will do, once it's on the screen, I will read the mover and the seconder and the first paragraph, and then for the rest, it is exactly as it was as presented in our agenda package that is online. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Cluche. Whereas in 2015, the City of Greater Sudbury entered into a contract with a contractor experienced in road construction projects to complete a project on Elgin Street in the city's downtown core. And as for the remainder of the motion, it says, I said exactly as it was in our package. So we'll just let you read it for a minute. That's pretty good. I think that's probably good. Are we done? Okay. Everybody's had a chance? Okay. Are there any questions with respect to that? I don't see any. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you for putting that up, Jessica. Okay. I think we're actually... We do not have a closed session, so that's, no, we don't have business arising from closed. So I have one motion left. And that is, it has been moved by Councillor Schumacher, seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended that we do now adjourn at 6:25 p.m. All those in favor? That carries.